What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn in Bleach as the Strongest Shinigami? Part 2. If you enjoy this type of content, please get Suga Tensho the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Remember to check out the original story linked in the description. Without further ado, let's get into the legend of the strongest Shinigami. Gazing at the gentle and beautiful face before him, Akira's expression was somewhat dazed. Out of the blue, not only was the debt not being collected, but he was even receiving a benefit. Could this be what they call good deeds are rewarded? Kisaragi-kun, is something wrong? A knowing smile appeared on Unohana's face. She always showed unlimited tolerance towards geniuses in the field of Kaido. Compared to Bakudo, binding, and Heido, destruction, talents in healing Kido were somewhat scarce. No, not at all. Akira shook his head, then extended both hands. Captain Unohana, I'll begin now. She nodded slightly. Then, under countless envious gazes that wished they could take his place, his fingers enclosed Unohana's injured left hand. A faint emerald light arose, and the injury began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. The snow-white skin and crimson blood intertwined, reflecting a unique beauty. What he found strange was that Unohana, the formidable first Kenpachi and one of the most proficient swordswomen in Soul Society, had not a single callus on her hand. Normally, hands that have wielded sword or knife handles for years should have thick calluses at the base of the thumb, as well as various scars. But hers was completely different, delicate and smooth, like a flawless piece of mutton fat jade. Unlike Akira's focus, her beautiful eyes were slightly furrowed, her puzzled gaze constantly lingering on that healing Kido light. Something unexpected had happened. Kawaii was right, this boy was strange. Strange to the point where one couldn't understand how his Kaido was activated. His Ryatsu was abundant, at least at the level of a high-ranking seated officer. But whether in terms of movements or the flow of Ryatsu, there wasn't a hint of the expected standards. Full of errors, yet it produced an effect stronger than normal basic Kaido. How on earth was this possible? Unohana was lost in thought and confusion, completely overlooking her now-healed hand, as well as someone's careful appraisal. Top-grade beauty, 99% pure, a rare treasure. Does it look good? Unohana asked, seeing that his hand was still holding hers. Akira nodded quite approvingly. How does it feel? Excellent. His expression suddenly froze, his neck creaking like a rusty hinge. When he raised his head, a smiling, beautiful face met his eyes. What should one do when caught red-handed touching someone's hand? He desperately wished he could ask for urgent advice online. Under her calm gaze, he smiled sheepishly and released her hand. Although she didn't say anything, he felt as if he were sweating buckets. He stood obediently to the side, awaiting judgment. Fortunately, Unohana didn't dwell on this. Instead, she turned to look at the students below the podium, continuing the day's lesson. Just as Akira was about to breathe a sigh of relief after class ended, he heard Unohana address him. Kisaragi-kun, please come over for a moment. I have something I need to ask you. His face fell, features drooping. Considering the difference in their combat abilities, he swallowed the refusal that had risen to his lips. Indeed, as he'd always suspected, gentle women are the most deadly, walking one in front and one behind. They made their way down the corridor. Upon reaching the teacher's office, they found it empty. I initially wanted to ask you this in the classroom, but considering its potential impact on your life, I thought it best to speak privately, Unohana said with a gentle smile, seemingly unaffected by the earlier incident. Are you interested in becoming the 5th seed of the 4th division? Akira was momentarily stunned, never expecting such a question. On the way here, he'd entertained thoughts of some cliché after-school scenario with a female teacher. His hopes had been misplaced. Isn't it premature? He asked, bewildered. I've only grasped the basics of Kaido. Besides, compared to healing Kido, Zanjutsu is more my strong suit. Midway through his response, Akira suddenly caught himself. Glancing at Unohana again, he noticed the gentle captain's gaze had intensified dramatically. Did you just say you're more proficient in Zanjutsu? His mouth twitched as he suppressed the urge to speak further. He'd spoken too hastily, forgetting her true identity. Clearly, Zanjutsu intrigued this first Kenpachi far more than Kaido. Akira was acutely aware of his Kaido level. Indeed, compared to his Zanjutsu prowess, his healing Kido skills were somewhat lacking. After all, the level disparity was evident. Zanjutsu, level 32 Kido, level 23, nearly a full tier's difference spoke volumes. Moreover, the Kido level encompassed Bakudo and Heido, which constituted a significant portion. Kaido accounted for only a fraction. Noting his silence, Unohana nodded slightly. I see. Let's set aside the matter of joining the 4th Division for now. It's almost time for your next class. You should go prepare. Akira breathed a sigh of relief, bid farewell to Unohana, and turned to leave without a backward glance. Sister Hana might be attractive, but life was more precious. Being alone with this dangerous woman in a room set his nerves on edge, his danger instinct blaring sharp alarms. Thank goodness she didn't press the issue, he thought, standing in the corridor. What's the next class again? Never mind. I'll find Sosuke. He always remembers. No one was more attuned to Aizen's Ryatsu than him. Even if Aizen deliberately concealed it, Akira could still pinpoint traces of his presence in the vast sea of people. You actually survived, Aizen remarked, somewhat surprised to see him unscathed. This guy had done something so brazen, yet here he was, without a scratch. What kind of talk is that? Akira snapped. Are you that eager for me to die so you can inherit my money? Aizen sighed helplessly, massaging his forehead. Yes, this was the familiar shrine priest he knew. By the way, what's our next class? Akira asked, falling into step beside him. Keiru-sensei's Zanjutsu class. Aizen replied calmly. We should head to the warehouse for bamboo swords. Today's lesson is likely practical combat. Hearing this, Akira's heart skipped a beat. He turned to Aizen with a blank expression and muttered, Sosuke, you don't think Keiru-sensei will suddenly fall ill, do you? Even the invincible teacher Urui had fallen. In Akira's eyes, Urui's mental fortitude was unparalleled. Despite often causing trouble and leading Class 1A to be repeatedly labeled as problematic, he would still show up at the Zanjutsu dojo rain or shine. Though his skills were somewhat lacking, his dedication surpassed that of over 90% of his colleagues. But now, Akira gazed dejectedly at the white figure at the front of the dojo, his expression a mix of bewilderment and resignation. Exactly, Resta Unohana was there, not the middle-aged teacher of them. He turned slightly towards Aizen beside him and asked in a low voice, Sosuke, do you think? Does Keiru-sensei still have a chance of survival? Hearing this, Aizen fell into deep thought before giving his assessment. It's hard to say, although he wasn't clear about Unohana's true identity. His instincts told him that this woman was far more complex than she appeared. When he first met her, he seemed to see mountains of corpses and seas of blood emanating from her presence. Even a genius like Aizen had to admit. So far, Retsu Unohana of the 4th Division was the strongest existence he had ever encountered, bar none. Based on this inference, if Urui insisted on not giving up the Zanjutsu class, Aizen couldn't guarantee he would come out unscathed. But what intrigued him more was what exactly Akira had said to her. However, it was obvious that she was here for him. The white figure stood at the front of the dojo, Unohana holding a bamboo sword, her gaze kindly sweeping over everyone. Whether it was an illusion or not, the moment she gripped the bamboo sword, her aura suddenly sharpened, as if emanating a crisscrossing radiance. Everyone, unfortunately, I just received news that teacher Keiru Urui has fallen ill and been sent to the coordinated relief station. So, I will be teaching this Zanjutsu class for you all. But please don't worry, I hold a 10th Dan in Kendo, which is more than enough to instruct you. Moreover, I understand from teacher Keiru Urui that today's Zanjutsu class content is practical combat. And what I excel at is practical combat. As soon as the words fell, her sharp gaze swept over, like two swords instantly piercing through Akira hiding in the crowd. The moment their eyes met, his danger instinct let out a shrill alarm. He instinctively gripped his bamboo sword tightly, his whole body instantly entering a combat state. The fierce aura immediately caused him to undergo a drastic change. Aizen looked at his friend beside him with surprise, finding his current appearance somewhat unfamiliar. However, Akira quickly regained his composure. After a brief shiver, He returned to his original state, as if the previous scene had been merely an illusion. "Everyone, are you ready?" Unohana asked gently. "Bring out your full strength. Now we begin the Zanjutsu practical combat. Let's start with you." The academy student sitting at the front was momentarily stunned, but soon became excited. He grabbed the bamboo sword and charged forward with a roar. Regardless of Unohana's actual Zanjutsu level, she was still one of the captains of the Godii 13. In the entire Seriidii, she was considered one of the top figures. To engage in practical combat with such an existence was something academy students of many generations could only dream of. The student who stepped forward was visibly thrilled. His hands, gripping the bamboo sword, trembled slightly as blood rushed to his face, flushing his cheeks. After bowing respectfully, he swiftly stepped forward and swung his sword down at her. As an elite student of Class 1A, he did possess some skill. However, the moment Unohana's stance unfolded, the student's fate was sealed. With just 2 or 3 parries, she knocked his bamboo sword flying, and he met with defeat. "Your movements are too broad and open," Unohana commented. "You're unable to adapt quickly. During daily practice, focus on integrating basic kendo into your instincts, completing multiple technique variations in the instant of swinging your sword. Of course, at your current stage, your kendo standard is still above the passing line." The defeated student's expression, initially dejected, brightened upon hearing the latter half of her words. "Thank you, Captain Unohana." Another student stepped forward, taking his stance. Then, with one strike, he too was defeated. Unohana offered a few explanatory sentences, pointing out his shortcomings and indicating the path for his future training. The practical combat progressed swiftly. Students came forward one after another, only to have their bamboo swords knocked flying within 2 or 3 moves. Under Unohana's guidance, everyone's understanding of kendo, and consequently Zanjutsu, improved significantly. Akira looked sorrowfully at his classmates around him, suddenly realizing that this group of elite academy students seemed to have all become fans of Sister Hana. "Sosuke, you're the only comrade left in my camp." Aizen brushed Akira's hand from his shoulder with slight disdain. He picked up the bamboo sword beside him and stood up, saying without looking back, "No, we were never in the same camp." Betrayed by his friend once again, Akira's demeanor instantly became more desolate. As he grappled with his emotions, Aizen had already positioned himself before Unohana. She observed the brown-haired youth with a contemplative gaze. She recalled this young man, Sosuke Aizen. He had accompanied Akira to the coordinated relief station when the latter needed treatment for his arm. The 2 young men seemed to share a close friendship. "Captain Unohana, please guide me." Aizen bowed slightly, then gripped the bamboo sword with both hands, assuming a standard starting stance. Unohana raised her bamboo sword and nodded solemnly. "Let's begin." The moment she finished speaking, Aizen exploded into action with astonishing speed. He moved like an arrow released from a bow, radiating an aura of sheer intensity. Unohana's eyes gleamed with interest, like a hunter who had found worthy prey. Her bamboo sword moved in a flurry, filling the air with its presence. In an instant, the atmosphere crackled with tension, and a powerful aura permeated the room. Unlike the previous bouts with the academy students, this clash between Aizen and Unohana felt like a real battle. His bamboo sword slashed fiercely, but she sidestepped with grace. She countered with a powerful strike, knocking his weapon from his hands. The match was over. The academy students stared at the 2 figures standing at the front, stunned by a sudden realization. It seemed Akira's unassuming companion was also an undeniable genius. Impressive kendo skills, Unohana praised. Indeed, geniuses tend to attract one another. After lowering her sword, she and Aizen suddenly looked at the last person who would go through the practical combat. "Kisaragi-kun, I hope your performance won't disappoint me." Watching the 2 smiling figures before him, Akira felt a chill run down his spine. In that moment, he sensed a multitude of malicious intentions converging upon him. He mused bitterly. So betrayal by a close friend truly is the most painful, isn't it? "Sosuke, you'll never inherit my legacy." Akira advanced with his sword, his face filled with indignation. He suddenly realized why Aizen had changed his usually low-key style. So this is what he was waiting for. A mutual appreciation between geniuses? No, this guy just wanted to trap him. Feeling the puzzled gazes surrounding him, Aizen sighed helplessly. His previous actions seemed to have backfired. To test this guy's true abilities, he had essentially sacrificed himself. Yet he couldn't suppress his curiosity. As his only friend at the Shino Academy, Little Priest, let me see your true limits. Standing opposite Unohana, Akira's face drooped, and he said pitifully in a small voice, Captain Unohana, I was just running my mouth earlier. I actually don't know anything about Zanjutsu. She responded with a smile. It's all right, true Zanjutsu doesn't lie in a fight. As the words fell, Akira saw Unohana change from holding the sword with one hand to gripping it with both. The previously gentle aura instantly vanished, replaced by a sharpness that cut to the bone. Her gentle smile slowly faded, her eyes widened slightly, her warm face now as cold as an Azura. A grand killing intent spilled out from beneath her robes. As if endless darkness spread from beneath her feet, the dojo transformed into hell. A bone-chilling cold devouring everything, and a terrifying pressure covered the area before her. The moment their calm gazes met, Akira's danger instinct issued an unprecedented warning, a sharp ringing seeming to snap his nerves. In his eyes, the bamboo sword that originally posed no threat was now inexplicably covered in mottled, sticky blood. Drip, drip, drip. Unohana's lips curled in a smile, but it no longer held her usual gentle approachability. Instead, it was filled with an intense killing intent. Without hesitation, the moment Akira gripped his bamboo sword, she took the initiative to attack. Her toes lightly touched the ground, and her whole body became like an arrow released from a bow, charging straight ahead. The bamboo sword whistled through the air. The air let out a groan of unbearable burden, as if it had been split apart, with the airflow separating to both sides. Without using even a bit of Ryatsu, relying solely on her understanding of Zanjutsu and rich combat experience, Unohana unleashed an astonishing sword technique at this moment. In an instant, the bamboo sword was at close range. Akira's pupils constricted sharply, his mind blank. His danger instinct erupted like a volcano, causing him to unconsciously unleash his strongest power. The bamboo swords clashed with a crisp sound. As they crossed paths, Unohana's footsteps faltered. Her nimble toes spun on the dojo floor. In the moment of turning, using the momentum, she pressed all her strength onto the bamboo sword, slashing diagonally downward. She controlled her power to be almost on par with Akira's. Otherwise, she would have overwhelmed him instantly in their first clash. Even so, his performance surprised her. It was a power unlike anything expected at this stage. Even without using Ryatsu, the young man's sword technique conveyed great power and weight, as if wielding a stone pillar rather than a bamboo sword. Akira's pupils remained constricted. Having barely weathered the first strike, the second sword technique followed immediately, leaving no time to breathe. The flat bamboo sword in his eyes became a sharp nail thrusting directly at his throat. He instinctively held his breath, tilting his neck back. The bamboo sword grazed his skin. As he narrowly avoided this technique, Akira realized he couldn't measure himself against the other academy students. To do so would be disastrous. After just this brief exchange, the watching academy students were dumbfounded. Their limited experience left them unable to comprehend the scene unfolding before them. Not long ago, the duel between Aizen and Unohana had already exceeded these elite students' understanding. Now, the clash between Akira and Unohana was even more breathtaking. Unohana had abandoned her instructional stance. The trajectory of her bamboo sword was now fierce and ruthless. One misstep could prove fatal, even with a practice weapon. Strong interest gleamed in Aizen's eyes. So this is your true level? Ryatsu, Kido, Zanjutsu, Hakuda, communication with Zanpakuto, talismans. Akira, how many more secrets are you hiding? At this moment, his curiosity piqued. The sword duel continued. Unohana gave Akira no time to rest, her toes barely touching the ground as she went for the kill. This time, she changed her method of attack. As she approached, the nimble bamboo sword suddenly slowed. With the sound of the first collision, the rhythm of Zanjutsu spread out. Like a heavy, ancient melody, the alternation of low and loud notes created a deep, clear texture that spread throughout the dojo. The heavy tones intertwined with the omnipresent killing intent, spreading like a mist. Just as Akira had finally become accustomed to Unohana's attack rhythm, the bamboo sword's blades suddenly changed. The melody abruptly became extremely high-pitched and fierce. The sound of the bamboo sword's strikes transformed into an unending wave of rainstorm, impacting the eardrums of the watching academy students. At this stage, Akira felt the pressure increase exponentially. Each time he received her sword technique, it made his arms tremble and his palms go numb. Fortunately, the heart of a god was constantly at work. Although he couldn't fully learn her sword techniques and style, he could absorb bits of knowledge from it. He was like a dry sponge, eagerly absorbing the sword knowledge that Unohana was carefully imparting. Zanjutsu. Level 32, 43, 47, 52, 56. His Zanjutsu level was rising rapidly, and Unohana noticed this too. From initially barely being able to defend, to later flowing like water, Akira's swordsmanship jumped from above average to top tier. Zanjutsu. Level 60. In just a few short minutes, his Zanjutsu level had crossed several major stages, reaching a level that even seated officers and vice captains would find hard to attain. When their bamboo swords crossed, it presented a scene of equal match. The corners of Unohana's mouth slightly raised as she realized the young man before her was a true, unparalleled genius in Zanjutsu. Thinking of this, that heart which had long been dormant suddenly blazed with fire once again. As the passionate duel reaches its climax, the sharp melody of clashing swords fills the air. Akira's Zanjutsu has reached a new level, his sword techniques now exquisite beyond compare. Even the elite academy students watching can't follow his lightning-fast movements. The bamboo swords clash, like invisible hands weaving a tapestry of broken notes, building to a crescendo. Akira switched to a one-handed grip, his body bending forward to dodge Unohana's downward strike. His head tilts back, his gaze eerily calm. Suddenly, a thunderous roar erupts. His right arm twisted, and an insane scene unfolds before the spectator's eyes. He abandons defense for all-out offense. While others might still be struggling to survive against Unohana, Akira has transcended their limitations. Sharp tones burst from his bamboo sword. His offensive becomes a relentless downpour, an unbroken screen of attacks enveloping Unohana's white-clad figure. A frenzied melody explodes skyward as bamboo fibers scatter throughout the dojo. Unohana shifted to defense, nimbly blocking the onslaught. Yet, her eyes betray a hint of passion as she regards the young man. How long has it been? 3 centuries, perhaps 5. Soul Society hasn't seen a genius like Akira in ages. Another thunderous roar. Akira's all-out swing collides with Unohana's sword, creating a deafening crash. The impact tears apart the floor, invisible ripples spreading throughout the dojo. Floorboards shaked violently as if caught in a vicious storm, peeling away layer by layer like dry twigs. As the dust settles, the academy students' faces showed only bewilderment and incomprehension. The arena is a wreck, with chips and dust covered the fractured floor. Scattered bamboo fibers adding a unique touch to the devastation. Akira stared at the shattered bamboo sword in his hand, lost in thought. Is it over? When he raised his head, a hint of daze appeared in his expression. Initially, Unohana's overwhelming pressure made him think he might die in this sword duel. However, by tapping into his ultimate trait, the heart of a god, Akira gradually absorbed many of her sword techniques and styles, knowledge he couldn't normally access. As he internalized this learned wisdom, his understanding of Zanjutsu began to progress by leaps and bounds. Noticing this, Unohana slowly lowered her bamboo sword. Compared to him, who still struggled to control his own power, she seemed much more at ease. Although her bamboo sword bore many marks, it remained largely intact and fit for another battle. In contrast, Akira's had exploded, leaving only the handle. After a brief silence, Unohana sighed with a tinge of regret. We should have used Zanpakuto. Hearing this, Akira instinctively looked towards her. Did this woman really want to kill him? The duel with bamboo swords had already been fierce. If they had used Zanpakuto, he might have immediately joined the previous head priest of the Sakahon shrine. Observing Unohana's slightly flushed cheeks, Akira let out a long sigh, his face nearly spelling out dejected. This woman was still too dangerous. He had been considering learning Zanjutsu under her guidance. After all, Yuroi no longer had anything to teach him. Even after this improvement, Akira could probably defeat him in just 2 or 3 strikes. Upon reflection, it seemed only Unohana was suitable to be his Zanjutsu teacher. But every time he recalled their recent duel, a subconscious fear gripped him. It was only because she hadn't gotten carried away. If she became too excited, his small frame might be cut down on the spot. Kisaragi-kun, you've proven what you said before, Unohana said, her cheeks still flushed from excitement, her familiar gentle smile reappearing. In Kaido, you're an undoubted genius, but your Zanjutsu skills are even more outstanding. Although it might be presumptuous, please consider joining the 4th Division as your first choice after graduation. With your talent, even succeeding my position isn't out of the question. As her words fell, a series of sharp inhales echoed through the dojo, as if trying to turn the area into a vacuum. Never before had an academy student, prior to graduation, received such high praise from a captain, let alone from Captain Unohana, the most popular among the Shinigami. Yet Akira Kisaragi, the shrine priest, the honorable helper of female students, the troublemaker among troublemakers in his class, had actually done it. But when Akira himself heard these words, he didn't show the joy they expected. Instead, he bristled like a startled hedgehog. "Ah, fickle woman," he thought. She had just expressed concern about negatively influencing him, preferring to extend the invitation privately. Yet in the blink of an eye, she'd changed her tune. Now his name would likely sweep through the entire Shino Academy once again. "Sigh, I'll think about it," Akira muttered. Truth be told, the 4th Division wasn't his first choice. But out of respect for her, he couldn't bring himself to refuse outright. Hearing this answer, Unohana showed no disappointment. She simply smiled and nodded gently. She turned around, hands folded in front of her, and bowed slightly to the surprised academy students. In a soft voice, she said, "Everyone, today's Zanjutsu class ends here. Regarding the advice I've given, please don't slack off in your daily practice. Also, if any of you are interested in Kaido, the 4th Division would be very welcoming." As she finished speaking, her gaze swept the room, lingering deliberately on Akira for a moment before she smiled gently and turned to leave the dojo. Just as she stepped out the door, a familiar voice once again sounded in his ears. "Retsu Unohana's trust level has reached the threshold. Check-in condition achieved. Character check-in, Retsu Unohana. Character check-in, Retsu Unohana. Obtain Zanjutsu level +3. Zanjutsu level increased. Currently at level 63. Obtained Ryatsu level +3. Ryatsu level increased. Currently at level 49. Obtained exclusive trait, Merciful Death Blade. Merciful Death Blade. Seeking life in death. Finding a sliver of mercy within the deadly sword. Zanjutsu speed and power both increase by 100%. Hidden effect. Akira's expression was slightly twisted, a mix of exaggeration masking undisguisable joy. His previously aching arms and body had miraculously recovered. What he had thought was a pointless beating turned out to be an unexpected boon. Unohana's trust level had reached the threshold, completing the character check-in. The increase in Ryatsu and Zanjutsu was merely a bonus. After all, with his current talent, it wouldn't take long to reach those levels anyway. But the exclusive trait was different. Until now, he had completed countless check-ins, daily, monthly, yearly location character, all accumulating to only 6 traits. Yet, each one's effect was enough to cause a leap in his strength. Even the somewhat inadequate miraculous healing had brought Unohana to her trust threshold, thus granting him the Merciful Death Blade trait. The boost in Zanjutsu speed and power alone made the beating worthwhile. This round, a massive profit. The only downside was the trait's mention of an unknown hidden effect. At this stage, its true nature remained a mystery. As the morning Zanjutsu class ended, Akira welcomed the long-awaited Kachiki family butler, a young man named Jin Jinjiro. He brought the 1 million Laotian kips that Sojin had promised. Observing the miserly-looking youth before him, Jin furrowed his brows deeply, increasingly feeling that his young master Sojin lacked business acumen. Though this amount meant little to the Kachiki family, their wealth wasn't infinite. Giving it to someone like this seemed no different from throwing it away. Jin shook his head and sighed, feeling a sense of misplaced trust. Fortunately, Akira remained oblivious to Jin's thoughts. Otherwise, he might have demonstrated the true meaning of a merciful death blade. "Sir Kisaragi, the money and accounts are now settled." Jin collected himself, perfectly concealing his emotions. As a Kachiki vassal, he'd learned not to question his master's affairs, even when they seemed utterly unreasonable. "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." He stood to depart, but was suddenly pushed back down. "Not so fast." Akira leaned in close, his expression serious. "Rich folks like Mr. So. No, I mean loaded toffs. No, that's not right either." Wealthy young masters, that's better. They're a rare breed. Regarding the talisman, please remind him not to rely on it too much when you return. The only one who can truly protect oneself is oneself. Hearing the first half of his statement, Jin's gaze held a hint of displeasure. What kind of talk was this? Insulting the master in front of his lackey? But upon hearing the latter half, his mood eased slightly. This miserly youth, though lacking in virtues, at least possessed a shred of conscience. I understand. Jin replied with a slight bow. I will report these words verbatim to young Master Sojin. After seeing him off, Akira wordlessly dragged along Aizen, who had been training intensely nearby, and left the temporary dormitory. Teacher's office. Yuroi Kaoru, eyeing the stack of high-value banknotes before the smug Akira, suddenly broke into a cold sweat. After a moment's hesitation, he leaned in and whispered, Akira, I know that although you're often mischievous, you're not bad at heart. While nothing has happened yet, you should escape early. I'm acquainted with Jidanbo Ikanzaka, who guards the Hakudaman, so use a mission proof to reach the White Road Gate, then escape to West Rakongai. Even the Godii 13 won't bother. Bang. Akira slammed the table, cutting off Yuroi mid-sentence. Yuru-sensei, how dare you falsely accuse me? This money is clean. That sucker Kachiki Sojin. Yuruoi's eyes widened in disbelief, his parched lips quivering as he croaked. You robbed young Master Sojin? Aizen watched this theatrical scene unfold, shaking his head helplessly. He couldn't fathom Akira's ways. He was like a contagious virus. Spend too much time with him, and your thinking inevitably warps to match his. Their teacher Yuroi was a prime example. What are you on about? Akira snapped. That sucker couldn't scrape together 10,000 Laotian kips. The Kachiki family's butler, Jin Jinjiro, brought this. Then you kidnapped young Master So. No, Akira roared. It was a business deal, all legitimate. People always seemed to misjudge him. Yuroi looked doubtful. Knowing Akira, this money shouldn't have come easily. But faced with such vehement insistence, he couldn't press further. As long as his student hadn't committed any grave offense, he'd be lenient. If you've done no wrong, that's good. He sighed, relieved. Your debt to Shino Academy is settled. Now, since you're here, I have news about upcoming course changes. Akira's face creased in confusion. Remember what I told you before. Yuroi sipped water to wet his throat before continuing. With Headmaster Genshiro Okikaba away on a mission, the Captain Commander is acting head of Shino Academy. His Excellency has noted the widening gap between elite and ordinary students, so he's implementing a new teaching method. Conventional lessons no longer benefit geniuses like you. It's time for real combat experience. His expression turned grave, his tone uncharacteristically serious. In East Rukongai's 32nd district, there's been a horrific civilian massacre. Your mission, investigate, then capture or kill the culprit. You'll act as true Shinigami, in the name of Academy students. East Rukongai, 32th district. Neat, flat houses line both sides of the road, with occasional undulations. As one of the front districts of Rukongai, the civilians here boasted ruddy complexions and strong bodies. Though simple, their clothes were clean and proper. Compared to the districts further back, these people lived quite comfortably. However, fear etched the faces of passers-by. They hurried along with hunched shoulders and bent bodies, frequently glancing behind them and into blind spots. The slightest rustle startled them, unconsciously quickening their pace. An unusual sight graced the civilian residential area of the 32nd district. Two young men in blue and white Shino Academy uniforms strolling down the street. The racial density in the air is normal, Aizen remarked, his gaze calm and hands hanging at his sides. His voice remained nonchalant, as if describing the most ordinary thing. The lingering smell of blood persists. The death toll should be between 12 and 14. The chaotic scene on the street neither affected his thinking nor caused any misjudgment. Upon arriving at the location Yuroi provided, he immediately assessed the situation. The buildings are intact, with no signs of intense fighting, he observed, his expression impassive as he peered through windows at the murder scenes within, analyzing from this point the culprit's strength. What are you doing? He broke off abruptly. Aizen, usually as calm as still water, instantly lost his composure when he noticed his companion's behavior. Akira, who accompanied him, had somehow donned shrine priest attire, predominantly white, with black accents forming the emblem of the one-eyed great god on the collar and hem. It looked both eerie and sacred. The only flaw was that this outfit hung a bit loose, slightly hindering movement. Of course, what caused Aizen's emotional fluctuation wasn't the wardrobe change at a murder scene. It was that Akira had somehow procured a wooden table and set up incense and teacups. A ritual, of course. Akira glanced sideways at him, bewildered that such an intelligent person could ask such an obvious question. Wasn't his intention clear? Aizen felt his temples throb. Of course he knew this was a ritual. After spending so much time with this priest, how could he not understand the process? What baffled him was the madness of performing a ritual at a murder scene. Could it really communicate with the dead and identify the culprit? The Sakahon shrine is unique, Akira said with a smile. Unlike other shrines, even those of the Ise family, our deity, the one-eyed great god, actually exists. As we say locally, those who dedicate everything but their eyes to him receive protection. Just like now, under Aizen's astonished gaze, he snapped his fingers. Instantly, the water in the teacup began to tremble. Ripples spread in slow circles, finally reflecting face after face. They've appeared. Akira smiled. Today's unjustly dead. Aizen frowned, his confusion deepening. He'd always believed that beings who died in Soul Society were broken down into basic erasure. The Shino Academy textbooks even stated that death was merely a cycle. People from the living world die and are reborn in Soul Society. The same applies to beings in Soul Society. Their erasure transforms into Kishi, reborn in the living world. Author's note: Kishi is a name that speaks to the natural ebb and flow of life. But what was this scene before him? Were the deceased, broken down into erasure, being reborn? Countless questions swirled in his mind. As Aizen tried to resolve one with his knowledge, more would surface. While he pondered, Akira had already dipped his finger into the teacup. His expression slightly serious, he occasionally muttered, I see. Is that so? What a pity. As if genuinely conversing with the deceased. Aizen watched in amazement, gaining a new understanding of his troublesome friend. When Akira withdrew his finger, he looked at Aizen with a grave expression. The culprit has been identified. We're probably no match for him. Let's report to Kaoru Sensei first. After he informs the Godai 13, we'll leave it to the Shinigami to handle. Author's note: for those who noticed, I am using two different ways to address their teacher. I use the surname Kaoru Sensei when they are talking casually, while I use the first name Yuru Sensei in conversation with the teacher himself, so that there is a greater connection and the MC can get away with his mischief. Aizen's pupils showed a barely noticeable fluctuation as he nodded slightly. As they began cleaning up the altar table, preparing to leave, the erasure density in the air suddenly shifted. A heavy Ryatsu descended, and a desperate aura erupted from behind the houses. Leaving, a hoarse, overlapping voice echoed in the empty street as a figure slowly emerged from one of the houses. Black shahakusho, average build, an ugly face crisscrossed with scars, and a zanpakuto slung at the waist. These details revealed the person's identity: a rogue Shinigami. Two brats who haven't even graduated from the Shino Academy. The scarred face sneered. Since you've discovered my secret, you might as well die. However, what surprised him was that when the two young men saw him, not only did they show no panic, but one of them even wore a playful smile, just like a hunter who had caught his prey. I once heard a theory that perpetrators of atrocities often return to the scene of the crime to admire their handiwork, Akira said with a smile, and you've just helped me confirm this theory. The scarred face's expression froze as he immediately realized he had been tricked by the young man before him. The revival of the dead, the identity of the culprit. It was all a lie. He had been hiding in the house earlier, clearly hearing the conversation between the two, thinking it was some new investigation method. But it turned out to be a complete deception. In an instant, he became furious with embarrassment and roared, "Humph! Don't think about escaping. Go accompany those fools in death." Hearing this, Akira raised an eyebrow, asking in surprise, "Escape? Why should we escape?" As soon as these words were spoken, the scarred face's heart skipped a beat. Boom! Violent Ryatsu was unleashed recklessly. Tangible light exploded from Akira's body, resonating with the erasure in the air and transforming into surging currents. The Ryatsu, too powerful to comprehend, made the scarred face's pupils contract, instantly suffocating him. His face flushed with blood. "Let's try this." Akira said, a sudden idea striking him as he raised his right hand in a shooting pose. Heido number 4, Byakurai Pale Lightning. As if countless birds were emitting piercing cries, dazzling white light exploded from his fingertip, transforming into a brilliant lightning bolt that traversed the empty street. The next moment, the black figure in front was pierced through the heart, his skipped heartbeat never to recover. Aizen wasn't very interested in such an overwhelming battle. The culprit was merely an ordinary Shinigami, after all. He looked with some curiosity at Akira, who was posing like a gunslinger. Earlier, when you obtained information from the deceased, were you just tricking the culprit or could you really do it? Hearing this, Akira turned his head, the corners of his mouth slightly raised in a meaningful smile. You guess. I'm not guessing. Say it or don't. Aizen's face remained expressionless, showing no interest in playing word games. Although Akira hadn't answered directly, based on his understanding of this guy, he was probably capable of doing it. Gathering the erasure of the deceased, making them reappear in this world, and then engaging in conversation. Was this the power of Mimahagi, or was it related to this priest? Countless thoughts swirled in Aizen's mind until his attention was once again drawn by someone. Heh, you don't think dying settles the score, do you? Under his astonished gaze, Akira moved the red offering table directly in front of the Shinigami's corpse. Incense was lit, a bell gently rung, and a teacup filled with clear water. In the name of Shrine Priest Akira, I offer this tribute to the one-eyed great god Mimahagi. His fingers fluttered like butterflies, forming one strange yet sacred hand seal after another. As he chanted, he visualized the object of worship in his mind. Aizen calmly observed, trying to understand this unique method of worship in his own way. He released his Ryatsu, covering the entire area. At this moment, his Raikaku, spiritual sense, was amplified to the extreme, capturing any possible changes in the air. Erasure flowed like water, like a gentle breeze, like moonlight. Wait, his eyes widened slightly as he noticed something unusual. As the ritual progressed, it seemed as if an invisible force was freezing the decomposed erasure of the deceased in its current state, finally gathering it in the clear water of the teacup. He tried to trace the source of this power. As he followed the faint fluctuations to their origin, he was shocked to discover that with his current Raikaku, he couldn't trace it to its end. The power was like a silk thread, continuous and unending, stretching far to the east. Aizen narrowed his eyes slightly, looking in the direction where the power disappeared, and had a rough idea in his mind. Sakahon District, Mimahagi Shrine. While he was trying to trace the source, Akira had already dealt with the erasure of the rogue Shinigami. A face filled with terror and disbelief appeared on the surface of the teacup, frantically moving about like a headless fly, trying to escape this cage-like constraint. However, no matter how it tried, it couldn't escape. I'm curious. What was your motive for committing such a serious crime? Akira dipped his finger into the teacup. In no time at all, his brow furrowed, then furrowed deeper, until his eyebrows almost joined together. It's utterly heartless. He casually shattered the cup, dispersing the gathered erasure within and completely ending the scarred face's life force. He killed an entire family over a verbal argument. Aizen's eyebrows raised slightly, but he showed no surprise. In his understanding, this world was rife with evil deeds. Such actions weren't uncommon in Soul Society's records. When people possess power that doesn't match their mental fortitude, their mentality often undergoes subtle changes. Good or evil. It's just a matter of a single thought. Well, we've clarified the motive and brought the culprit to justice. Akira clapped his hands and began tidying up his tools. From the incense to the bell, these were all rewards from daily check-ins. Though not particularly useful, they were high quality compared to similar market products. Notably, these rewards could be stored in the system's exclusive space. Of course, this was limited to inanimate objects. The wild rabbit he'd drawn a few days ago couldn't be stored, so he had to slaughter it and tearfully eat several large bowls of rice with it. Aizen was accustomed to Akira's actions by now. Putting incense and bells into his pocket without any visible bulge was child's play. He'd even seen Akira pull out a brand new bed from his crotch before. Though he couldn't fathom how he managed it, Aizen had resolved never to casually touch his things. Who knew where this lunatic might have put them before? After retrieving the scarred face's Zanpakuto, they cleaned up the scene and prepared to retrace their steps. This mission wasn't particularly challenging. Even other elite academy students could have completed it, albeit with more difficulty. The gap between ordinary Shinigami division members and elite academy students wasn't vast. Of course, compared to Akira and Aizen, the difference was quite stark. Ordinary Shinigami couldn't withstand even a burst of their Ryatsu. "So Suke, let's go," Akira urged, glancing at Aizen, who was still observing the surroundings. "Time waits for no one. If we hurry back, we can still catch dinner at the academy cafeteria. Tonight, they're serving special tofu dishes." Aizen glanced sideways at him, said nothing, and turned to follow. This guy couldn't remember his class schedule or theoretical knowledge, but he had the academy cafeteria's weekly menu memorized crystal clear. Perhaps this was the true meaning of talent. "I'm not sure if it's just my imagination," Aizen mused as they walked side by side down the empty street. "But this mission doesn't seem as straightforward as it appears." Akira waved his hand, slapping his shoulder. "The Rukongai isn't full of intrigue. Commoner deaths are commonplace here. Only the first 10 districts offer any semblance of stability." At this, his lips curled into a slight smile. "And that's what the commoners aspire to most." Aizen nodded, understanding. Like Akira, he had grown up in the Rukongai and knew its rules well. Compared to the nobles' quarters, the outer districts of Rukongai were practically hell. As the two figures vanished at the street's end, a faint glow materialized on the empty ground. Where there should have been nothing, a blurry, hazy scene appeared. It was as if a layer of white mosaic had been painted over the scene. The pair moved at a brisk pace, even faster than when they had arrived. Aizen was puzzled, but assumed his companion was simply eager to return for a meal. Upon leaving the 32nd district, Akira suddenly slowed. He clenched his fists, glancing apprehensively at Aizen. "You must have noticed it too, right? The abnormality in the erasure?" Aizen furrowed his brow, perplexed by his unfamiliar expression. Akira shook his head, looking back toward the 32nd district. He muttered, "No, it's the scent of death." From the moment he stepped into the 32nd district, his danger instinct began frantically warning him, with endless malice emanating from all directions. It felt as if the next step would plunge him into the abyss of death. Unlike the sword duel with Unohana, whose danger stemmed from pure killing intent, an instinctive desire for battle, the danger in this district was more like a mixture of malice, killing intent, and a disregard for life. Although they couldn't detect the specific location of the other's Ryatsu, Akira was certain that the source of the malice might be quietly observing them from some hidden corner. Therefore, he dared not make any unusual movements. Everything proceeded as usual. It wasn't until they safely left the 32nd district that the danger instinct's warning finally subsided, and his tense nerves gradually relaxed. The scent of death. Aizen furrowed his brow slightly, trying hard to recall all the abnormalities in the district. He was aware of Akira's inexplicable intuition, so he didn't doubt the truthfulness of these words. But no matter how he tried to remember, he couldn't find any clues. "Well, no need to worry too much about it." Akira laughed carelessly. "Let Kaoru-sensei and the others deal with the headache when the time comes. We just need to hand over the murderer's Zanpakuto, make an honest report, and then this matter will have nothing to do with us. Plus, we can get a nice reward. Tonight's tofu dishes are on me." Aizen nodded imperceptibly. Although what Akira said made sense, for some reason, he had an uncomfortable feeling ever since hearing those words earlier. With his current level of Ryatsu, for someone to avoid detection and not be discovered by him, they would have to be at least at a captain's level, right? Did this incident actually involve someone at the captain level? What role did that rogue Shinigami play in all of this? And what was the truth behind everything? Aizen lowered his eyelids slightly, and in his deliberately concealed pupils, a flame of curiosity burned fiercely. Shino Academy. Teacher's office. Yuroi stared at the distinctive Zanpakuto on the desk, lost in thought. How long has it been? In less than a day, they had investigated the incident and executed the culprit. This kid's strength now rivals that of a high-ranking seated officer. Doesn't it? With this in mind, he narrowed his eyes and began to size up Akira, who was lounging in another teacher's chair. Unfathomable. Utterly unfathomable now. This is your well-deserved reward. Yuroi efficiently placed a stack of bills on the desk. Regarding the intelligence you mentioned about potential greater danger in the 32nd district of East Rukongai, I'll report it truthfully to the Captain Commander. What happens after this is no longer your concern. Akira casually pocketed the money and left, dragging along the pensive Aizen. However, just before exiting, Aizen halted and turned back to say gravely, "If possible, try to have a captain investigate this matter." Yuruoi's expression froze, confusion flickering across his face, but upon seeing his serious gaze, he couldn't help but nod. Although he didn't know much about this student, Sosuke Aizen, the mere fact that he could keep up with Akira spoke volumes about his abilities. "I should report to the captain commander immediately." Yuruoi snatched up the Zanpakuto from the desk and hurriedly left the office. Night fell. Akira got his wish and savored the special tofu dishes at the academy cafeteria. Though Aizen seemed somewhat distracted during the meal, he still ate heartily. Tofu was one of his favorite ingredients. Its fragrant aroma, silky texture, and subtle flavor made it nearly impossible to ruin, even for a mediocre chef. Fortunately, the academy's culinary staff were far from mediocre. After dinner, the pair returned to their temporary dormitory right on schedule. The reconstruction of the Shino men's dormitory was ongoing, so they were housed in a temporary structure built by the 12th Division's research group. To their credit, the quality of this makeshift dormitory was quite impressive. Its only drawback was its somewhat cramped quarters. For Akira and Aizen, sharing a 4-person room, this wasn't much of an issue. Other temporary dorms housed 4 students, with one unfortunate unit crammed with 6 occupants. Belly full of food and coffee, life is good, Akira declared, sprawled on his bed like a contented fish, his face the picture of satisfaction. Compared to his previous life of hardship in the Sakahone district, this was practically paradise. Of course, he mused, resting his head on Nanao's lap would make it even better. He reminisced about his time at the shrine, when after a hearty meal, he'd recline on her lap, relishing a massage from her deft fingers. The strength, touch, and technique had been unparalleled. Aizen glanced at the lounging Akira, then returned to his own bed, immediately diving into his Ryatsu training. Great curiosity, he believed, was fueled by formidable strength. No matter one's innate talent, without diligent practice, one would inevitably blend into mediocrity. Though uncertain of Akira's exact potential, he had observed his recent performances with interest. If he maintained this trajectory, he might one day surpass Aizen himself. This thought kindled a peculiar sense of urgency in his heart. Everyone's studying, so I should too, Akira sighed, sitting up straight. The downside of befriending someone like Aizen was this. When he studied and trained, goofing off alone brought a crushing sense of guilt. Such guilt made it impossible to eat or sleep well, a form of mental torture. Fortunately, Akira consoled himself. His own talent wasn't shabby. While he couldn't boast a photographic memory, he did possess a keen intuition. He straightened his posture, ready to join in the studying. Racial affinity maxed out. Let's see your limit. As he fully released his Ryatsu, the long-awaited unexpected event unfolded. The racial in the air began to flow in irregular patterns, gradually converging. A faint white glow emerged in the dormitory, illuminating the colorful fabrics above, below, and around. Aizen slowly opened his eyes and sighed helplessly. He knew this incident wasn't as simple as it appeared. This shrine priest was like a human-shaped minesweeper. Wherever he went, unexpected situations were bound to occur. Akira, too, noticed the anomaly. As he clearly saw the changes in the dormitory, his eyes widened. The white light was blurry and hazy. As Racial gathered, it gradually became clearer, revealing a pure white, simple figure. What is this? A pixelation come to life. A pure white Haori draped over a black shahakusho. Long ebony hair tied back in a ponytail, with 2 strands hanging down like catfish whiskers. His slightly pale face betrayed no emotion. His pitch-black eyes radiated an endless depth, as if nothing in this world held his interest. This was Akira's first impression of the pixelated figure that suddenly materialized in their dormitory. Although he didn't recognize the person before him, he could discern the man's identity from his distinctive attire. On the back of the Haori, the numbered 11 was embroidered in an elaborate style. The captain of the 11th Division, the 8th Kenpachi, Soya Azashiro. Among this year's students at the Shino Academy, you two are considered to have exceptional qualities. The man before him spoke calmly, as if stating a mere fact. Leave the academy as soon as possible. Staying here will only waste your talents. If you want to become true Shinigami, fulfill your duty. Kill all the hollows in this world. Hearing this, Akira scratched his head in confusion. But I never said I wanted to become a Shinigami. although he wasn't quite sure why this captain of the 11th Division had appeared here. When Soya materialized, the sense of danger Akira had felt earlier in the 32nd District resurged. He deduced that the man before him had a significant connection to the massacre in the Rukongai. Consequently, his first impression of this 8th Kenpachi wasn't favorable. It was even worse than when he first met Aizen. Soya paused, the words on the tip of his tongue suddenly difficult to express. It was his first time encountering a student who didn't aspire to become a Shinigami. What's so great about being a Shinigami? Akira sneered. You have to obey your superiors, be responsible for your subordinates, and sometimes even be commanded by incompetent, simple-minded individuals who are just occupying a position. Unless you get to be a captain, then it might be okay. After this speech, Soya fell silent. So it wasn't that Akira wasn't interested in being a Shinigami, but that he wasn't interested in being an ordinary division member. Beside him, Aizen's eyes gleamed with a faint light, a subtle reiatsu fluctuating around his body, appearing rather eerie. The moment Soya appeared, he had already entered a battle-ready state. Akira, though unclear about this guy's intentions, surmised from his manner of appearance that it probably wasn't anything good. After all, a Shinigami captain wouldn't be sneaking into the men's dormitory at night without reason. However, just as he was about to make a move, a calm voice suddenly rang out. Put away your reiatsu, Sosuke Aizen. Soya, with his back to him, said coolly, I admit you have talent, but you haven't reached your limit yet. With your current abilities, you can't stop me from doing anything. Aizen's heart sank immediately, his brows furrowing. This man seemed to know him far too well. So, Captain Azashiro, you sneaked into the men's dormitory just to tell us about a Shinigami's duties. Akira asked with confusion, if that's all. No. Soya cut him off decisively, worried about another derailment of the conversation. Everyone has different ideas, and I have no right to interfere with others' life paths. I came because I have a request. Upon hearing this, both Akira and Aizen's faces filled with bewilderment. A captain, coming to ask a favor from a student? Moreover, regarding this matter, his gaze turned ice-cold, and the temperature in the dormitory plummeted. Even the active erasure, spirit particles, in the air grew still. I hope you two can keep it a secret from me. At this moment, Akira's danger instinct pierced through his mind like a high note that could obliterate the entire world. Of course we can, he answered without hesitation, choosing life over breaking the law. Aizen's brows furrowed deeper as he struggled to comprehend the situation. When he was about to speak, he caught Akira's frantic eye signals. After careful consideration, he chose to remain silent, because based on his understanding of this guy, if there was even the slightest possibility of resistance, this guy would have directly given Soya a flying midfinger to the face. Such compliant behavior spoke volumes. If that's the case, then I'll take my leave. From start to finish, Soya's emotions barely fluctuated, like a precision instrument. Only when speaking with Akira did his expression show the slightest change. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the morning, he said finally, I'll be waiting for you at the north gate of the Shino Academy. Of course, Akira may come alone if he wishes. As the words faded, the white figure began to blur. The erasure disintegrated from his body, and his reiatsu vanished from the spot. With his departure, the dormant erasure stirred back to life. The temperature slowly began to rise. Akira and Aizen looked at each other, feeling powerless for the first time. What are you planning to do? Aizen broke the silence, his voice deep. Akira moved his legs, which had gone numb from the pressure. Through gritted teeth, he said, What choice do I have? This old guy kills without blinking. If I don't go, I'm dead. By the way, I'm going alone. Confusion immediately spread across Aizen's face. Akira grinned frankly. I don't know what he wants me to do, but if I can't accomplish it, I might not return. If you come along, you'd just be another soul under his blade. Then neither your ideals nor mine would be realized. Aizen fell silent before asking slowly, Don't you fear death? What kind of nonsense is that? Akira looked at him as if he were an idiot. Do I look like someone who isn't afraid of death? If I had a choice, it wouldn't be me lying here, but that old guy with the catfish whiskers. Don't talk nonsense. If I don't come back, remember to take care of the Sakahon shrine for me. All right, good night, Sosuke. As the words fell, the dormitory returned to silence once again. Soon, the rhythmic sound of soft breathing filled the air as Akira drifted into dreamland. Against the wall, Aizen stood bathed in moonlight streaming through the window, his face bearing an expression of deep contemplation. The next day, everything seemed normal. From Aizen's perspective, Akira hadn't changed at all. Still carefree enough to steal his grilled fish without a care in the world. Today's lesson was Kido, Akira's greatest weakness. During class, he showed unusual focus, carefully noting every key point the teacher mentioned. He might have even taken notes, if he'd had a pen. This was typical of him, being atypical in the most typical way. Despite Aizen's careful observation, he couldn't detect any concern in Akira about the previous night's events. The Heido number 4, Byakurai, and the Heido number 11, Tsuzuri Raiden, utilize different Ryatsu operation methods and have distinct release forms. However, their power levels are quite similar when using the same amount of Ryatsu. As the Kido instructor for Class 1, he ranked among the elite Shinigami. Akira studied the teacher on the platform, a man with a stern face and muscular build who looked more suited to berserking than spellcasting. The future captain of the Kido Corps, Tensai Tsukabshi. Notably, Tensai was the only teacher who could physically overpower Akira. Tsukabshi-sensei, looking at the sequence numbers, there are less than 300 types of Kido. If all these Kido were deciphered by the enemy, would we be helpless? The curious student's question made Tensai pause before breaking into hearty laughter. Haha, every class asks something similar. But once they dive deeper into Kido studies, they realize that mastering all spells is practically impossible. Of course, throughout Soul Society's long history, we've had our share of so-called geniuses. These geniuses who mastered all Kido went on to create their own spells based on the existing ones. Since the sequence numbers were already taken, their new spells weren't included in our textbooks. If you're curious, visit the library in your free time. For now, focus on your core studies. His expression turned serious, his pectoral muscles twitching noticeably. Otherwise, don't expect any mercy during exams. Truth be told, his intimidating presence overshadowed Kido itself. You know what they say, a mage needs to bulk up and master combat skills. Skull smashing, hit blocking, head chopping. Just add a light spell for flair, and you're set. After the Kido class, Akira couldn't agree more. So Suke, what do you think? Aizen sighed helplessly. Whatever makes you happy. Having faced similar questions from him before, Aizen was nearly immune now. Trying to engage in serious discussion was pointless. Within moments, this guy would drag you down to his level of thinking, and then somehow make you feel inferior with his wealth of experience. So silence was the wisest choice. That night was dark and windy. A young figure leaned against the wall, scanning the area. Finding no patrolling Shinigami nearby, he leaped over the high wall of the Shino Academy in a single bound. Just as he was feeling smug about his stealth, the door beside him slowly opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. The door wasn't locked. Aizen said expressionlessly. Akira's eyes widened in surprise. Weren't you not coming? Who said that? Yeah, I forgot that part. Akira came to his senses, realizing Aizen had never actually told he won't come. You're too weak. Aizen said calmly. If Soya Azashiro were to make a move, you wouldn't even have a chance to escape. But with me here, it's different. Hearing this, Akira perked up. You mean you can beat him? Aizen stared at the young man in front of him, as if looking at an idiot. I can make our deaths a bit more dignified. In the silence, a white light like a mosaic wavered in the empty space. As Reisher gathered in abundance, a white figure materialized clearly. Soya's utterly expressionless face appeared before the two once again. Noticing that Akira and Aizen had arrived together as promised, he showed a hint of surprise. After a moment of silence, the corner of his mouth curved into a barely perceptible arc. Since you're both here, follow me. Where to? The central great underground prison. Hearing this, Akira and Aizen exchanged glances, both seeing confusion in each other's eyes. But as Soya's figure grew more distant, the two felt it unwise to discuss the matter and followed with heavy steps. A massive pit dominated the vast area, its interior lined with sturdy stone slabs stained with fresh, dark red marks. The place seemed abandoned. No Shinigami guards patrolled nearby, and the sealed iron gate had rusted from disuse. In a blur of motion too quick for Akira to follow, Soya twisted the iron gate like a pretzel and tossed it aside as if it were nothing. As they approached the deep pit, a nauseating stench grew stronger, reminiscent of a hell filled with corpses. Death's presence weighed on Akira's heart like invisible hands squeezing tight. Despite his familiarity with the horrors of the Sakahone district, the oppressive atmosphere here made him deeply uneasy. When they reached the pit's edge, they saw blue stone slabs stained black-red with mottled bloodstains. The acrid smell assaulted their senses, telling visitors all they needed to know about this execution ground's brutality. 100 years ago, the Asashiro family met with misfortune. Soya narrated dispassionately, as if recounting someone else's story. Other nobles, coveting our wealth, framed and killed most of our family. They threw the survivors into this pit, the central great underground prison. Here, we were forced to fight against hollows used for executions. Those who survived would be cast into the Dongai, parsing world, without a Jigakucho, hell butterfly to guide them. The nobles who had framed the Asashiro family watched from above, reveling in the condemned's suffering below. My sister and I were the last ones thrown into this execution ground. Only now did Soya's voice betray the slightest emotion. To protect me, my sister attempted the Heido number 73, Soren Sokatsui, a spell beyond her capabilities. It cost her her life. He turned to face the silent Akira and whispered, "If possible, I want to see my sister one more time." Author's note: some important terms to understand. Dongai parsing world is the corridor-like dimension that connects Soul Society and the human world. Jigakucho, hell butterfly, they guide the Shinigami through the Senkamen when traveling between Soul Society and the human world, thereby saving them from the inconvenience of passing through the Dongai. Heido number 4, Byakurai, pale lightning Heido number 11, Tsuzuri Raiden, bound lightning Heido number 73, Soren Sokatsui. Twin lotus blue fire crashed down. Money will eventually disappear, but honor never will. Little Soya, you have better talent than your sister, so you will surely become a Shinigami strong enough to shoulder everything. Just like our ancestors. She smiled gently, like warm sunshine in a spring breeze. In a family consumed by the stench of money, she was like a lotus growing from the mud, pure and noble. Though the Asashiro family's boy could never match his sister, her smile was his only solace. For him, no effort was too great if it meant seeing that smile again. Well, I suppose I'll become a Shinigami then. But sister, don't stand in my way. With these defiant thoughts, the Asashiro family's boy began his studies. Hearing his stubborn words, his sister smiled gently and said, "Little Soya will surely surpass our ancestors and become a role model for the Asashiro family." That comforting smile etched itself deep in the young boy's heart, becoming his greatest motivation to grow stronger and study, even though he could barely lift a bamboo sword. However, their peaceful life shattered suddenly. Several high-ranking nobles, coveting the Asashiro family's wealth, conspired against them. They fabricated evidence that the family was plotting to overthrow the 5 noble houses and the royal family. Soon, all members of the family were arrested. When the verdict came, the Asashiro family met its end. Everyone was sent to the execution grounds, a massive pit where they were forced to fight hollows to the death. Above, the nobles who had falsely accused them watched with sneering mockery. They sat in the stands, reveling in the sight of the condemned suffering below, where blood and corpses painted a hellish scene. The Asashiro family, having focused on commerce for years while neglecting their legacy of strength, couldn't defeat even a single execution hollow. The Asashiro family's boy was the last to be sent to the execution grounds. From his cell beside the pit, he witnessed the horrific slaughter of his relatives, his frail body trembling with fear. When only the boy and his sister remained of the family, the execution method changed. The siblings were sent into the pit together, where the guards removed their restraints and gave each of them an asachi. The executioner sneered from the high platform. "This battle will prove one thing. The once revered Asashiro family has no strength worthy of our respect. Their bloodline is worthless. These siblings are all that remains, and even together they cannot kill a single hollow." This proves the Asashiro family's fall from power, though the boy couldn't understand their words. When he heard these corrupt nobles cursing his sister, an uncontrollable anger blazed in his heart like a surging fire. The execution began. A massive hollow appeared before them, its blood-filled eyes hungry for flesh. Its powerful Ryatsu bore down on the boy's small body, and his face contorted with despair as he trembled uncontrollably. Just as fear engulfed him, his sister turned back with her familiar gentle smile. "It's all right, little Soya. I'll make sure you get out of here alive." What happened next became a blur in the boy's memory. He only remembered the unusually hot blood that splashed across his face. The giant hollow stood covered in grotesque wounds, thick blood streaming down its massive body and pooling on the ground. In its ugly jaw lay the young woman's body. The boy gripped his asachi, desperate to save his sister, but fear paralyzed his entire body. At that moment, the dying young woman looked back at him. There was no blame in her gaze as her lips curved into one last gentle smile. "Little Soya, you must become a Shinigami with great power." As her soft whisper faded, complex Kido incantations followed. The next moment, intense blue flames engulfed the hollow's grotesque face, consuming everything. The boy's wail caught in his throat, emerging only as a hoarse cry of ultimate grief. Like a beast. What happened after that? Akira wanted to ask, but held his tongue, knowing it might be like rubbing salt in the wound. Aware of the vast difference in their strength, he suppressed this suicidal impulse. Soya calmly glanced at the two beside him, as if seeing through their thoughts, and continued the story. The boy had barely regained his senses when the executioner's ugly sneer echoed from the high platform. "The last boy of the Azashiro family has dried his tears. Seems he's ready to fight. Let's give him a big round of applause." Though the boy couldn't yet grasp the meaning of these words, what followed shattered any remaining hope and laid bare the noble's true depravity. "All right, release the next hollow into the execution grounds. The story after that doesn't matter anymore." Soya cut off their interest with an explanation. "Due to the special nature of my Zanpakuto, the erasure that Soul Society decomposed that day remained in the execution grounds." So, his calm gaze fell on Akira. "I'll do my best." The young man thumped his chest, though his voice betrayed his uncertainty. His previous rituals had only gathered erasure from the recently deceased. Attempting to collect and manifest erasure from someone who died 100 years ago seemed nearly impossible. Under their puzzled gazes, Akira produced an altar table from his school uniform sleeve. From within his chest, he drew forth incense, bells, ritual wands, and a teacup filled with clear water. Then, from his crotch, he retrieved a pristine set of shrine priest's clothes. In moments, the Shino Academy student transformed into the head priest of the Sakahon Shrine. Fragrant smoke from the lit incense wafted through the execution grounds, while gentle bell rings echoed through the empty space. "In the name of Shrine Priest Akira, I summon the one-eyed great god Mimahagi." Akira's fingers moved skillfully, weaving countless hand seals while he chanted and released his strongest Ryatsu. He reasoned that since he was summoning someone from a century ago, using more Ryatsu than usual should be acceptable. With that thought, he completed the final steps of the ritual. Boom! A massive boom erupted in the execution grounds, its force reaching the dome. Before their astonished eyes, a huge, sacred black shadow loomed above Akira's body, distorting the surrounding erasure. The black ink continued to spread until darkness engulfed everything. Silence consumed the blood and death. When the single eye opened, its indifferent gaze swept across the execution grounds, and everything froze in that moment. Fine black shadows spread across its profound form, countless branch-like tendrils falling around Akira, encircling him like stars around the moon. This eerie, unprecedented sight made him hesitate. The erasure in the air materialized and solidified, gathering before the altar to form a slender figure. Seeing this, Soya's calm expression shattered. His eyes widened slightly as he unconsciously raised his right hand, trembling as he reached toward that figure. But when the figure's form and face became clear, his expression froze. It wasn't his sister. The face was strange yet somehow familiar, as if he'd seen it somewhere before. Like spilled ink, the shadows continued to spread. One blurred figure after another materialized from the condensing erasure, sprouting like bamboo shoots after rain. Cold sweat dripped down Akira's forehead as understanding dawned on him. The ritual had drawn too many responses from the one-eyed god, due to excess Ryatsu. The lingering erasure of the dead in the execution grounds had all been resurrected. Soya had mentioned that almost his entire family had died in this execution ground. As the figures became clearer, their presence grew heavier. Chaotic voices filled the air, transforming the gloomy execution ground into something resembling a marketplace. What exactly happened? Wasn't I dead? That guy in the white Haori looks so full of himself. Why is my body kind of blurry? As countless confused questions echoed, The black shadows surging through the execution ground began to boil, threatening to engulf everything. Akira, what exactly is happening? Soya furrowed his brows, sensing the situation slipping beyond his control. These ethereal beings were all his former family members. Over 300 figures crowded the vast, deep pit. What was this? An Azashiro family reunion. Soya held no attachment to his former family members. The corrupt clan, obsessed with money and having abandoned their ancestors' honor, had brought about their own extinction. The Azashiro clan's extinction was inextricably linked to these people. Their very existence had forced him to endure decades of unbearable pain. Captain Azashiro, why don't you have a chat with your father? Akira suggested carefully, if I heard correctly, that middle-aged balding man on your left should be your father. Soya's expression darkened, his blood pressure rising. Though he was already aware of this kid's unreliability, dealing with him still managed to breach his psychological defenses. That Aizen fellow was quite the young genius. Managing to coexist peacefully with this kid for so long without killing him was truly admirable. Don't like your father? Akira pointed. Then perhaps you prefer your mother. 3 meters to the back left. No need to thank me. Aizen quietly warned from the side. You should talk less, or we'll be collecting your corpse tonight. Noticing Soya's murderous glare, Akira gave an awkward laugh and wisely chose to back down. When facing a captain-level fighter, it's better to be careful. Who knows if he might be a killer like Sister Hannah? Soya's gaze swept across the familiar faces, searching for the person he cared about most. Back then, just as the execution hollow was about to devour him, he awakened his Zanpakuto, its spirit named Urozakuro. Author's note: there is no official name for his Zanpakuto, only the name of its Bankai release, Urozakuro. Then came the moment of nobility's reckoning. Soya unleashed extreme suffering upon the viewing platform, slaughtering those high and mighty nobles in the most cruel ways imaginable. The stench of blood and viscera permeated the execution ground, leaving not a single intact corpse. These nobles suffered far more brutally than the Azashiro family members who died in the hollow's mouth. Their agony multiplied tenfold, even 100-fold. Yet revenge brought Soya no spiritual salvation. Instead, his heart felt emptier than ever, having lost everything he cherished. He could only wander aimlessly on an endless path. In the days that followed, he reached a temporary understanding, deciding to honor his sister's dying words as his life's goal, to become a Shinigami of great power. Decades later, he became the 8th Kenpachi. He adhered strictly to the Shinigami's code of conduct, fulfilling his sister's final wishes perfectly. Northwest direction, in the cell on the wall. Aizen suddenly spoke up as Soya searched. The moment these words were uttered, the Kenpachi before them shattered into countless points of white light, vanishing from sight. Such keen observation, Sosuke? Akira asked in surprise. I didn't expect you could spot his sister's traces from so far away. No. Aizen shook his head, correcting him. I didn't spot her traces. I deduced where she should be. There's only one cell in the entire execution ground. From his earlier story, when the Azashiro family members were being executed, he was confined in that cell, watching his relatives die one by one. If his sister truly cared for him as much as the story suggests, she would definitely appear in that cell. Hearing this, Akira drew in a sharp breath. This Sosuke kid had a razor-sharp mind. Calm under pressure, clear-thinking, quick-witted. Such a person could achieve greatness in any endeavor. Compared to those good-for-nothings in Soul Society, Aizen was superior in every way. With such a friend, how could great achievements be far off? As he was pondering what grand schemes to pursue, discordant voices arose from among the resurrected crowd. How dare that Azashiro brat treat me like this? The punishment was far too lenient. We should have tortured that brat to death when we had the chance. What's happening now? Why are we mixed with these commoners? Where are the Shinigami? Where are those fools? Bitter curses and angry shouts filled the execution ground. As the resurrected nobles vented their lingering hatred and fear from their past lives, a figure pushed through the ethereal forms, emerging before them. Akira stared at their twisted faces, feeling an inexplicable revulsion rise in his heart. His eyes narrowed as his Ryatsu surged, driving massive black shadows to explode behind him like a tidal wave, threatening to engulf everything in its path. Since you're already dead, vanish into eternal obscurity. May the one-eyed God bless you forever. Death is not the end, forgetting is. When the resurrected Reisher were decomposed again, these once proud nobles finally remembered their old fear of subjugation. Familiar faces vanished one by one, devoured and broken down by tree-like black shadows until nothing remained. Terror filled their faces as curses turned to desperate pleas. Some even attempted to force non-existent tears, hoping to sway the youth's resolve. But their theatrics earned no mercy, only hastening their second death. "Akira, do you hate these nobles?" Aizen asked calmly from the side. "They don't seem to bear any grudge against you." Hearing this, Akira's movements paused briefly as he sighed and answered honestly. "It's not that I hate nobles. Good and bad exist in every group, nobles included. In the Sakahone district, I've witnessed both cruel murderers and compassionate nobles. I simply despise those of poor character." As he spoke, his hands moved ceaselessly, commanding the tree-like ink-black shadows to decompose these dead souls once more. Unlike their first death, Akira deemed it too lenient to let these inferior beings simply die. Instead, he chose to sacrifice them all to the one-eyed god Mimahagi, forever stripping away their right to reincarnate and casting them into death's eternal darkness. The nearby Azashiro family members required no intervention. They would vanish with the sacrificial power. After all, gathering the dead's Reisher to manifest them in this world was no true resurrection. Watching the aggressive and domineering Akira, Aizen's gaze lowered, his tense expression softening slightly. Though typically carefree, at his core, this young man wasn't truly malicious. Perhaps this way of living was the path to ultimate happiness. In the dark prison, mottled bloodstains decorated the black walls, with dried chunks of flesh scattered across the stone-paved floor. The execution ground had been abandoned for decades by Central 40SXS decree after the brutal slaughter of the nobles who once sat in its high seats. But now, two white figures appeared in the prison. The first wore a pristine captain's haori. The second wore tattered prison clothes. Yet their demeanors formed a stark contrast with their attire. Wearing the white captain's haori, Soya nervously gazed at the familiar yet strange face before him. Words caught in his throat, palms sweating. Even facing the previous Kenpachi Kurashiki hadn't made him this nervous. "Is that little Soya?" Confusion flashed in the girl's eyes, as if she couldn't comprehend her current state or the strange familiarity she felt toward the man before her. Without hesitation, she walked up to him, her thin, scarred hands tightly gripping his large ones. In that moment, the girl smiled, her familiar gentleness appearing on her gaunt face like a bright light dispersing all darkness from the prison. "It really is little Soya, though your hands have grown much larger and gained some calluses. You truly kept your promise to sister." Soya stared at the girl's face, opening his mouth to speak, but finding his throat too tight for words. "It seems many years have passed." The girl's right hand gently caressed his face. "You must have been so tired, carrying so many burdens all these years. Sister shouldn't have said those things back then. What's gone is gone. Trying to hold on only brings pain, whether it's glory or hope. But since you're still alive, it means they really kept their promise. Sister is truly happy to see you again." Time slipped away unnoticed. Once Soya found his voice, though hoarse, the words poured out endlessly as he shared his years of experiences with the girl before him. Then her figure began rippling like water. Their expressions froze, and the prison fell into dead silence. After a pause, the girl's lips curved into a smile. "Looks like time's up. What a shame. I didn't get to hear about your life as captain." Light emanated from her thin body, fragments drifting away like snowflakes, transforming into countless Reisher particles that slowly faded. "Don't be sad, little Soya. Seeing you grown up, sister has no regrets anymore." The girl smiled gently. "Let's make one final promise. Live well, little Soya." As her words faded, light flashed, and her ethereal figure shattered, dissolving before his eyes. The emotions he had held back burst forth like a volcano. Beast-like wails echoed through the prison, his anguish tearing through his heart. In the execution ground, Akira stood dumbfounded, staring in shock toward the sound. "Sosuke, I think we really traumatized him. Maybe we went too far." Aizen sighed wearily. "Please change Weeb to I. You made and executed this plan. You ignored all my advice. When this guy gets stubborn, he's like an obstinate mule. Completely impossible to reason with." "Fine, Sosuke." Akira's hands continued their fluid movements. "What you did was indeed excessive. Just this once, Don't do it again, okay? Aizen fell silent. In the name of the shrine priest, Akira, I sacrifice to the one-eyed god Mimahagi. Akira's expression hardened as he chanted the sacrificial incantation. Materialized Ryatsu flowed before the altar, sketching Mimahagi's cold single eye. Sacrifice the dead. Release the power of the divine eye hidden in the Sakahone district. The black shadows coalesced into a right hand with an eye growing in its palm, gathering countless lights within. Suddenly, terrifying pressure swept forth. Akira's face flushed with strain as he fought to control the black shadow, directing it into the altar's bell. Sosuke. Enormous Ryatsu crashed down like a mountain torrent, rampaging through the execution ground. The black shadow, bound by this terrifying force, completed its final descent into the bell. A black single eye slowly emerged on the bell's surface. The person who completed all this lay sprawled on the ground like a dead fish, taking in more breaths than letting them out, clearly on his last legs. This time we took a huge loss, Akira said painfully after recovering. Back in the Sakahone district, performing such a high-grade ritual would have earned at least 8,000 Laotian kips to 10,000 Laotian kips. This time we did it for free, lost a bell, 2 incense sticks, and a ceremonial wand. A complete loss with no profit. Aizen swept an expressionless glance at his companion. You made the decision yourself, and now you're the one regretting it. If I hadn't been beside you just now, the ritual ceremony wouldn't have been completed, and you might have been affected yourself. Don't you ever have a reliable moment? Hearing this, Akira furrowed his brows, a thoughtful expression appearing on his face. Just when Aizen thought this fellow might be turning over a new leaf, he heard a firm and resolute answer. No, Aizen. Resisting the urge to slash his sword at someone's head, he turned his gaze to the distance. The wailing continued, extreme grief clearly audible in the voice. To Soya, from now on, he would truly be alone. The pain from his youth was playing out before his eyes once again. The helplessness hadn't changed at all. Even though he had become one of the dozen strongest Shinigami in the Soul Society, he still couldn't bring back his sister's life. Whether one was strong or weak, in the face of life and death, it made no difference. Even someone as powerful as Captain Commander Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto couldn't change this reality. Soya was immersed in grief and couldn't pull himself out. At the execution grounds, Aizen's eye twitched as he watched Akira stuff the offering table into his crotch. Despite having seen it many times, he still couldn't understand this guy's peculiar tastes. Are you planning to give the bell directly to Captain Azashiro? How could that be possible? Akira's eyes widened as he waved the bell showily. This is a sacred item that I obtained through great effort and countless Riryoku, with my devout faith in Lord Mimahagi. Does it need extra payment? Aizen asked helplessly. You know me well, Sosuke. Akira grinned. After some time, the grieving voice finally subsided, and Soya reappeared at the execution grounds. The grounds had returned to their usual calm. When he came before Akira and Aizen again, the 8th Kenpachi had regained his characteristic ice-cold mask. Even colder than before, like a mountain of ice that would never melt. Despite the accident, thank you, Akira, Soya was a person of principle. He knew his actions had been quite offensive. Neither this priest nor Aizen should have been involved in such matters. But back in the 32nd district of East Rukongai, Akira's ritual technique had directly revived the dead, stirring ripples in his previously calm state of mind. If possible, even if just to see her one more time. With that hope, he had activated his Urozakuro's ability, creating a clone that appeared in the temporary quarters to make his request. Though not expecting much, he had brought them to this execution ground that buried his pain. Fortunately, Akira hadn't disappointed him. Now that they were involved, he decided to tell them about his original plan and hear their opinions. Regarding the 32nd district, Soya began coolly. It was actually my test site. What do you mean? Akira looked up in confusion. Soya explained coldly, to modify all residents of the Rukongai, grant them the ability to eliminate hollows, and finally invade Hueco Mundo. The 32nd District incident was just the beginning. The next step will be to report this plan to the Central 46 and implement it. Before he could finish, he noticed Akira, whom he had considered his benefactor, showing a subtle change in expression. The Rukongai you mentioned, it wouldn't happen to include the Sakahone District, would it? Soya nodded impassively, naturally. To eliminate hollows, we need many. Shing. The sound of a blade being drawn cut off his words. Aizen was shocked to see Akira displaying an unfamiliar side he had never witnessed before. Wild Ryatsu flowed freely, wrapping around the silver-white blade. His face, usually playful, had transformed in an instant to show absolute calm without a trace of emotion. You should know, I come from the local shrine in the Sakahone district. A dangerous light flickered along Akira's blade. That place is my home. Soya nodded slightly, I know. But sacrificing the individual for the greater good. Isn't that what a true Shinigami should do? Magnificent blade light and invisible Ryatsu collided in the air, sparking flames that illuminated two expressionless, eerily calm faces in the darkness. To hell with Shinigami. Tenrin Shunko Celestial Flash Sword. A violent sword attack erupted like a raging storm, wind and rain rushing forward. The invisible Raisher gathered in massive quantities throughout the air, forming blade after blade of light to block the overwhelmingly fierce strikes. Bankai Yurozakuro. The power to merge one's own Raisher with that contained in other living or non-living things, then manipulate them at will. A hint of surprise flashed in Soya's eyes. His Bankai had merged with all the Raisher in the Siriidii, allowing him to monitor everything within this space. Yet brain processing had its limits, so he could only observe the parts he deemed important. Places like the Shino Academy weren't worth his attention. Now, witnessing his outburst, he was genuinely surprised. Who would have thought that beneath that carefree exterior lurked such ferocity? Even facing an existence countless times stronger than himself, Akira still dared to draw his sword to protect what he cherished. Akira, you have already far surpassed me. The corners of Soya's mouth lifted in a barely perceptible smile. Akira gripped his Zanpakuto tightly, his cold gaze falling like a blade upon the figure before him. The difference in strength meant nothing. He knew only one thing. If he didn't stand up to protect now, then truly no one would care. However, just as the battle intensified, a familiar voice rang out again. Soya Azashiro's trust level has reached the threshold. Check-in condition achieved. Character check-in, Soya Azashiro. Character check-in, Soya Azashiro. Obtain Zanjutsu level +1. Zanjutsu level increased. Currently at level 64. Obtained Ryatsu level +3. Ryatsu level increased. Currently at level 52. Obtained exclusive trait. Kido Mastery. Kido Mastery. A proper Shinigami shouldn't just swing around a mere sword at enemies. A true Shinigami should be elegant. The epitome of elegance, overwhelming foes with firepower amid casual conversation, drowning your enemies in endless Kido. Kido consumption reduced by 50% and power increased by 100%. Boom. The breakthrough in Ryatsu intensified Akira's assault to new heights. Flamboyant Ryatsu coiled like tentacles around his body, while sharp blades scattered in all directions, each strike precisely aimed at vital points. His body flowed like water between the Raisher blade lights, graceful as a swallow. A fierce, cold aura erupted uncontrollably, like bottled rage finally finding release. Soya furrowed his brow at this unusual state, regret flickering across his mind. Perhaps using the Sakahone district to provoke this youth had been too heavy-handed. The gap cannot be bridged by technique alone, Soya said calmly, his expression serene. Between our Ryatsu levels lies an insurmountable chasm. Akira-kun, you cannot stop me from doing anything. Tenrin Senpu, Celestial Whirlwind Cut. The response came as a slash of extreme ferocity, as if attempting to cleave the very air. As the blade fell, a sharp shattering sound rang out. Merciful Death Blade. The Zanjutsu stolen from Unohana blazed brilliantly in Akira's hands. The deceptive blade trajectories even caused Soya, master of all Raisher in the execution ground, to reveal a momentary flaw. Raisher blade lights intersected to form a heaven and earth net that descended, making the air tremble and groan under the strain. In a moment of epiphany, Akira's movements transformed. His eyes became terribly void of emotion as his sword, craving blood, embraced the darkness. Jigaku Yami Setsudan, Hellish Darkness Severance. Blade lights crossed, reflecting his cold countenance. The night became a massive curtain, and in the moonlit execution ground thick with bloodlust, the sword style of the first Kenpachi made its spectacular entrance. The Death Slayer descended like an invisible hand sweeping all away, its scattered blade lights dissolving into countless Raisher particles as bone-chilling cold rushed straight at Soya's face. Most terrifying of all, An instinctive fear gripped the captain as the racer around him conjured a strange illusion. The dark face of a terrifying woman superimposed over Akira's emotionless visage. Clang! The sound of clashing metal echoed through the execution ground. An invisible barrier stood firm, unmoved despite the tremendous power and Ryatsu unleashed against it. The difference was clear as day. Looking at the scene before him, Akira tilted his head back, his gaze ice-cold, his parched lips parting. Hado number 33. Sokatsui blue fire crashed down. Soya's eyes widened, his pupils contracting. It wasn't Akira's knowledge of Kido that surprised him. It was the fact that releasing the Hado number 33 at such close range would maximize its power while engulfing them both. A brilliant azure flame erupted from the blade, illuminating the execution ground with searing heat. The flames licked outward, instantly melting a strand of hanging hair. When Soya realized the youth before him had no intention of holding back, he activated his ability. The Racier chaos transformed into an ultimate storm, raging through the execution ground until the blazing azure flame was completely extinguished. The solid ground collapsed with a roar, transforming into surging waves that rolled layer upon layer, reaching dozens of meters high like a living thing as it sealed and imprisoned the youth within. Though it's somewhat discourteous, please forgive my use of such crude methods. Soya, having ended the battle in an instant, spoke as if he had done something trivial. He walked slowly to Akira's front, explaining apologetically, "After meeting my sister, I changed my perspective. Eliminating hollows is the duty of Shinigami, not the residents of Rakongai. By placing non-existent burdens on them, I perhaps became the very thing I once despised most. Those nobles who look down on us with contempt and disdain." Akira's expression changed slightly, clearly caught off guard by this turn of events. "And those words I spoke earlier," Soya sighed, "were merely to understand your thoughts." Akira's brows furrowed, his violent aura subsiding slightly as he asked suspiciously, "So you were just provoking me earlier? Then, were you desperately wanting to get beaten up?" Hearing this, Soya hesitated. The logic made sense, but why did these words sound strange? "Please forgive me." He sighed, lowering his stance. He was a man of strong principles. The other party had allowed him to meet his sister, yet he had tested them in such an offensive way. This had already violated his principles to some extent. But for the future of Soul Society and the Shinigami, Soya was willing to bear others' misunderstandings. Though their time together had been brief, Akira's various performances had already surpassed any genius from the past 100 years. If such a person were to go astray, the destruction would far exceed his own. Yet after this test, Soya believed that with such steadfast convictions, even if the future path twisted, it wouldn't go too far wrong. Perhaps in the near future, the name Akira Kisaragi would spread throughout all of Soul Society. Soya looked at the youth imprisoned by the raised ground, a thoughtful look flashing in his eyes. "After my promotion to captain of the 11th Division, all of the Azashiro family's assets were returned, even more than before. To thank you for everything you've done tonight, if you don't mind, please accept these material possessions." Hearing this, Akira's eyes brightened, getting such an unexpected pleasant surprise. This Kenpachi fellow was decent, first offering trust, then property. After such operations, tonight's acting efforts weren't in vain. "It's getting late, time to head back." Soya glanced at the brightening sky's edge, raising his hand to release Akira's imprisonment. "Someone will visit the Shino Academy later to discuss these matters with you. Farewell, you two." As the words fell, his figure shattered directly, dispersing into countless racier in the air. Just as Akira was feeling self-satisfied, thinking he had fooled everyone, a calm and familiar voice sounded by his ear. "Akira, you've worked hard." Aizen walked slowly to his front, the corners of his mouth curling in a playful smile. "Such superb acting skills. You must have practiced quite a bit, haven't you? So let's guess. The one you frequently deceive with these acting skills. It wouldn't be me, would it?" At these words, Akira's heart skipped a beat, looking at the gentle smile before him. He felt cold sweat running down his back. Author's note: just a brief explanation about the new move he used. The moves I created for him, as mentioned before, follow the principle of his trait, Heart of a God, and therefore contain the word celestial in all movements. But at the same time, I realized that the MC would start using the other trait, Merciful Death Blade, as a base for other techniques. That's why he will use two sword styles, depending on the context: Celestial Reaper style and Death Slayer style. While one is based on Celestial, with illuminated strikes for common fights, intense but in a clearer context. The other is based on Hell, where the intention is purely to kill and destroy, a fight with no escape and the pure pleasure of elimination. How do you plan to handle this bell? After mildly intimidating Akira, Aizen took out the bell that had been handed to him earlier. The bell no longer retained its original brass color. Ink-black patterns, like tree branches, wrapped around the bell's body, culminating in a single black eye at its center. Seeing him return to his usual serious demeanor, Akira cleared his throat and continued, "Of course, we'll return it to Captain Azashiro. What else would we do, keep it? Revival is definitely hopeless. They've been dead for decades or even centuries. Even if it's the Soul King. He should be able to do it." He suddenly remembered that the deity enshrined at Sakahon's shrine shared origins with the Soul King. "When his subordinate arrives, we'll have them pass it along," he said dismissively with a wave of his hand. Aizen nodded, having no particular thoughts on the matter. The power maintaining the deceased's current state within the bell came from the local Sakahon shrine. With his current knowledge and abilities, he couldn't yet analyze the true nature of this power. However, based on the circumstances, he could guess it had a significant connection to the Soul King's ability to create the three worlds. The Soul King, such a distant name. Textbooks had repeatedly mentioned the Soul King's powers. How, with the assistance of the five noble family's ancestors, he single-handedly created the Soul Society, the world of the living, and Hueco Mundo. According to records, after completing all this, the Soul King retreated to his palace, silently watching over the development of the three worlds. And yet, after meeting his troublesome friend Akira, Aizen gradually began to doubt this narrative. According to him, the one-eyed great deity enshrined at Sakahon Shrine was a tribute to the Soul King's right arm, also known as Mimahagi. How could the supposedly lofty Soul King be connected to a local shrine in the Rukongai? Could there be some unknown secret here? The Soul King, was he truly as lofty as they said? Aizen gazed at the sky, where a cool breeze brought refreshing relief, and a crescent moon hung high among the hazy clouds, appearing and disappearing. Over the next few days, Akira's life returned to normal. He was like an unbridled horse, frantically running around the Shino Academy. While normal students followed a simple triangle pattern, dormitory, cafeteria, classroom, Akira wove a web of countless points. His shadow could be found wherever people gathered, and where they couldn't, he'd create conditions to make it possible. The abandoned central execution ground hadn't triggered a location check-in, and this bothered him immensely. The more he dwelled on it, the more he felt at a loss, as if he'd missed out on billions. Even with the Azashiro family's assets as compensation, the missed opportunity gnawed at him. So he began searching for possible location check-ins around the Shino Academy. Though the chances were slim, he figured it was better than nothing. Unfortunately, all he got were daily check-ins. Compito candy, tea eggs, Genryusai Yamamoto's personal beard comb, calligraphy works. The first two items were barely acceptable. At least they were edible. But what use was a beard comb to a youth? Even more frustrating was discovering that the calligraphy works were in Aizen's handwriting, which Akira recognized after comparing it with his homework notebook. He was furious. What good were Aizen's calligraphy works when he could already get that guy to do his homework with just a few tofu dishes? In this aspect, he thought smugly, even capitalists could learn from him. On the third day after completing the execution ground ritual, the person Soya mentioned arrived at the Shino Academy. It was a familiar face. The Kachiki family's butler, Jin Jinjiro. "Why is it you again?" Akira exclaimed in surprise. "Is this what they call getting lucky twice with the same fortune cookie?" Before he could finish speaking, Jin felt his blood pressure rising, threatening to exceed his Ryatsu. This kid's tongue grew sharper with each meeting. During their last encounter, he'd at least tried to hide his mockery. Now he didn't even bother with pretense. He really had no respect. "Captain Azashiro entrusted me with this task," Jin said, barely suppressing his anger while maintaining the highest professional standards before the youth. "Regarding the transfer of the Azashiro family assets, you just need to sign your name on this paper. I'll handle the rest." Akira signed his name without hesitation, quite casually. Truth be told, through osmosis, his calligraphy skills had begun trending toward Aizen's level. At least his writing no longer looked like talismans. Looking at the barely legible signature, Jin's mouth twitched. He considered asking the kid to write it again, but quickly abandoned the idea, fearing what other mind-bending comments might follow. Now that the transfer is complete, I'll take my leave, he said, standing up abruptly. As for the Azushiro family mansion, since it's been abandoned for years, you'll need to have someone clean it first if you plan to live there. It's located at North Rukongai, 6th District, 6072. Akira nodded. The mansion's abandonment made sense. Soya didn't want to face past memories, and the nobles were too terrified of him to covet his family's property. Now it all benefited him. Good things really do happen to good people. After handing over the bell to Jin, the man hurried away. Akira couldn't help feeling disappointed. What a dedicated professional. Not even staying for a cup of tea. What a waste of the only low-quality tea he'd gotten from check-ins. Time for class, Aizen said, suddenly putting away his textbook from where he'd been studying intensely at his desk. It's Kido class again, with Professor Tsukabashi. He's the teacher who gets sick the least. Akira nodded in strong agreement. Tensai Tsukabashi was built like an ox. He could kill a Jillian with one punch, making Kido somewhat superfluous for him. Worth mentioning was that his status panel had reached quite an unbalanced state. Name: Akira Kisaragi. Identity: Sakahon Shrine Head Priest, Rukongai Commoner, Shino Academy First-Year Student, Ryatsu. Level 52 Rank 11 Spirit Class, Zanjutsu. Level 64 Hakuda. Level 22 Ho-Ho. Level 21 Kido. Level 24 Exclusive Trait: Racial Affinity, Danger Instinct, Heart of a God, Miraculous Healing, Light as a Feather, Merciful Death Blade. Kido Mastery: His Ryatsu had soared to rank 11, and his Zanjutsu had reached level 64. With the boost from Death Sword's Mercy, in terms of pure sword techniques, Akira could even dare to exchange a blow or two with some seated officers, though only those below 6th seat. In contrast, his Hakuda, Ho-Ho, and Kido were rather pathetic. Although he was already a genius among his classmates, it was unfortunate that he had an even more brilliant monster by his side. Even though his abilities were quite impressive, he still didn't dare relax too much, fearing being left so far behind by a certain someone that he couldn't even see their dust. Fortunately, Sosuke wasn't the stingy type. Just recently, he had kindly prepared a method for rapid strengthening. It seemed to have some connection to this Kido class. At the specialized Kido training grounds, Heido number 31, Shikaho, is one of our most commonly used Heido spells. Tensai spread his rod-like fingers, and a red flame slowly burned in his palm, radiating waves of heat outward. Not only is its power impressive, but by controlling the frequency of Ryatsu output, it can serve different purposes. For example, illumination. The curtains in the training ground fell, the lights went out, and darkness instantly descended. A bright yet gentle light immediately illuminated the entire training ground. It revealed the awestruck faces of the academy students. Of course, this requires precise control and understanding of Kido itself. He extinguished the Shikaho in his palm with such force that it created a sonic boom, making everyone flinch. Though everything he said was correct, his intimidating appearance wasn't exactly helping his case. Akira wasn't alone in thinking this. The other students shared similar thoughts. Even the notoriously fierce 11th Division rarely had members who could match this Kido instructor from the Shino Academy in physical presence. Moreover, rumors suggested that Tensai would soon be promoted to Grand Kido Chief, a position equal to that of a Gotei 13 captain. When students first heard this news, nearly all of them were in disbelief. As they gradually accepted it, they began to worry about the future of the Kido Corps. As Siriiti's ranged combat specialists, would they become just another brute squad like the 11th Division? To understand Kido, you must first know its essence. From incantations to hand signs, from Ryatsu release methods to racial flow patterns. Even for incantations alone, the same Heido can have different variations. While mastering one is usually sufficient, achieving precise control, like mine, requires understanding multiple incantations and hand signs. If nothing else, Tensai's skill at teaching Kido was unmatched. Even Akira, notorious for dozing off during theory classes, was listening with great interest, though there were other reasons he stayed awake. Tensai's instruction flowed seamlessly from main concepts to detailed understanding, methodically analyzing every fundamental aspect of Kido. During the break, he allowed students to test Shikaho's power in the air while he supervised for safety. So Sosuke, what's this quick way to get stronger you mentioned before? Akira asked eagerly. Wasn't it related to Kido? Can you explain it briefly? Aizen nodded slightly and replied calmly. Remember when you used the ritual method to communicate with your Asachi, infusing it with soul essence to transform it into your personal Zanpakuto? Akira nodded, though he still didn't understand his Zanpakuto's ability or know its true name. He continued attempting to communicate with it through the ritual method and enter his inner world during his free time. The result was the same as last time. When he entered the Sakahon shrine and was about to touch the divine statue, the Zanpakuto space would suddenly shatter. As Aizen explained, Akira's Ryatsu level wasn't sufficient to support the next stage of Shirkai release. Despite being talented compared to his peers, mastering the true name would take considerable time and effort. Beyond the daily check-ins, it would require training so intense it could lead to burnout. Furthermore, his spiritual body had undergone massive changes. A Shinigami's body is composed entirely of Reisha. Aizen explained, countless Reisha particles are arranged in an intricate structure to build a perfect spiritual body without flaws, ultimately governed by the soul to form an entity known as a Shinigami. Don't look at me like that. It's straight from the textbook. Ah! Akira suddenly realized that compared to Aizen, he was practically illiterate. Unfortunately, theory classes weren't nearly as engaging as rituals, and he couldn't muster any enthusiasm. Fortunately, he had an all-capable friend. If he ran into any impossible problems in the future, he could just call upon the invincible Aizen to sort things out. What I'm trying to say is, when you completed the ritual communication, your spiritual body's essence had already changed. Aizen continued. Simply put, you're evolving. Akira furrowed his brows. Seeing his friend attempt to think for himself, Aizen felt gratified. If this guy didn't use his brain soon, it would rust. Since we can't achieve rapid advancement in Ryatsu levels quickly, he shared his thoughts. Why not tap into the potential hidden within the spiritual body? Kido and spiritual bodies share certain similarities, and their compatibility is very high. We can try to imprint Kido into the spiritual body, then release it through Hakuda techniques. Or in simpler terms, further strengthen the spiritual body. Of course, this method carries risks. So, it's best if we wait until you've completely mastered a particular Kido before we attempt the experiment. Akira, do you understand? Seeing his friend's dazed state, Aizen frowned. Yeah, I understand. Akira grinned. Isn't this exactly what I concluded before? As a qualified mage, you should first max out your health and endurance stats. Then choose skills like Skull Splitter, Block, Critical Strike, Charge, Decapitate, and Armor Break. And finally, just learn the light spell. Hearing this, Aizen was stunned. Apparently, his friend had somehow guessed correctly this time. I just don't understand one thing, Akira said, puzzled. What is it? You just said my spiritual body's essence has changed. His expression grew more serious. Does that mean I'm no longer of the Shinigami species? And at equal Ryatsu levels, excluding all external factors, purely in terms of combatability. Even you might not be able to beat me. Aizen frowned deeply, unable to follow this guy's train of thought for a moment. Based on this reasoning, Akira struck his fist against his palm, excitedly reaching a conclusion. One way to become stronger is... Sosuke, I'm done being a Shinigami. Author's note. Some important terms to understand. Heido number 31, Shikaho, Red Fire Cannon. What else would you be if not a Shinigami? Does Kisaragi-kun want to enter the nest of worms? A massive head with horns in its hairstyle suddenly loomed before Akira, bearing a determined expression and features that radiated strength. The light glinting off his square glasses was nearly blinding. Tsukabshi-sensei. Aizen nodded slightly in greeting, respectful as always. As a model student, though his abilities were average, he scored perfect marks in every theory course, truly embodying the role of an academic genius. Teachers from various departments had already begun competing to recruit Aizen for their divisions, as individuals skilled in documentation and theory were extremely rare. Please make some noise when you walk next time, sir. If I hadn't noticed you in time, I might have thrown a punch. Akira's mouth twitched as he spoke with a wry expression. In truth, he hadn't sensed Tesai's approach at all. This future Grand Kido chief seemed to be incredibly powerful in every field. However, it was also because he had no malicious intent. Otherwise, Akira's danger instinct would have given him a friendly warning. Kisaragi-kun, your thoughts are dangerous. Despite Tessai's rugged appearance, his personality was quite gentle, especially with academy students. He had never scolded a single student. Though with his appearance alone, no one dared cause trouble in his class anyway. I was just joking with Sosuke earlier. Akira's expression turned serious as he explained, becoming a proper Shinigami is my life's goal, and I will devote all my efforts to it. I will uphold the name of the Godai 13 until the end. Tessai nodded with satisfaction, patted his shoulder, and praised him warmly. Very good, that's the spirit. As expected of someone the captain commander called a promising talent. Akira. Confused face? Keep up the good work. He patted his shoulder forcefully again, the impact making Akira's shoulder bones respond with a loud thud. Only someone like him could withstand such a hit. Any other student would have ended up in the infirmary. Before he could ask anything, a massive explosion thundered through the empty training ground, red flames surging toward the ceiling. The air instantly filled with scorching heat. Akira looked toward where the flames had risen and muttered in amazement. Now that's talent. Managing to blow yourself up with a shikaho reminds me of someone I used to know. Unable to continue chatting, Tessai hurried to handle the emergency. The person you're thinking of better not be yourself. Aizen said flatly, I won't experiment without fully mastering the Kido. Having noticed their teacher's approach in time, Tessai hadn't heard his earlier comments. Some things were better known by fewer people. The Soul Society wasn't as peaceful as it appeared on the surface. Akira nodded, his expression turning serious. I understand. The Kido class ended with an accident. The male student who had attempted the self-destructing shikaho received emergency treatment from Tessai before being rushed to the 4th Division's coordinated relief station. With burns covering 74.3% of his body, he was practically charred beyond recognition. While many students were grateful for the early dismissal, several overachievers stayed behind in the training ground to practice Kido, Akira and Aizen among them. The training ground was spacious, and the two found a quiet corner to begin their practice. With many other students around, they wouldn't draw attention. Which Kido are you most familiar with? Aizen asked. After brief consideration, Akira answered decisively, Heido No. 4 Byakurai. I had mastered it even before entering the academy. Hearing this, Aizen recalled how this guy had used Byakurai in the 32nd district. It had been completely different from the Shino Academy's teachings, more like a self-taught technique. Yet its power had been remarkable. A single bolt had pierced straight through a Godai 13 deserter's heart. This alone proved his mastery of the Heido. Good. Aizen nodded. First, try reducing your Ryatsu output to release Byakurai in its weakest state. Like this. Before his wide eyes, Aizen spread his fingers. White electrical arcs danced at his fingertips like countless musical notes composing a beautiful melody. Akira held his breath, his demeanor instantly becoming more serious. His talent, heart of a god operating at maximum capacity. Let him observe everything. The flow of Reisher, the circulation of Ryatsu, the changes in hand seals, the incantation. At this moment, Aizen was surprised to notice the change in his demeanor. Calm, natural, serious, focused. In some ways, he was remarkably similar to he himself. This guy. When the lightning faded, Akira returned to his usual carefree self. Did you learn anything? A little bit. Good, show me. Aizen was curious to see how much he had grasped from such a brief demonstration. However, when Akira slowly spread his fingers in the same pose, his surprise reached new heights. Electric arcs danced, reflecting brilliant light like a grand fireworks display at his fingertips. The Ryatsu was controlled at such a low level that the arcs could only produce light, harmless even to touch. How could a mere Byakurai defeat me? The arrogant expression shattered Aizen's surprise, returning his emotions to their usual calm. He looked up at Akira. His talent was indeed impressive, and he knew how to use it. Truly first-class genius material. Unfortunately, he had quite a mouth on him. First step complete. Aizen glanced at him playing happily with the electric arcs, his lips curving upward. Now for the second step. It's simple. With your talent, you should master it quickly. Kido usually exists in barrier form. To construct this form, you combine incantations and hand seals to create specific patterns. What you need to learn is the Kido pattern. This is from Byakurai. Before Akira's astonished gaze, weak electric arcs flowed from Aizen's fingertips, writing in the air. Soon, a completely new Kido pattern appeared before him. Wait, Akira asked, puzzled. If I remember correctly, only some Kido have barrier forms. Byakurai isn't one of them. Where did you get this pattern from? Aizen finished the final stroke and replied, I researched it, of course. When? I never knew about this. Akira was confused. He and Aizen spent all their time together, hanging out 24/7, yet he'd never seen him research any Kido. Hearing this, Aizen smiled, his genius aura naturally manifesting. Just now. All right, so that's how you want to play it. Akira laughed bitterly. I'll give you full marks for that act. He had been outmaneuvered by Aizen, yet there was nothing he could say about it. If anyone else had made such claims, he could have simply scoffed. But this was coming from the genius himself. Aizen ignored his outburst and began explaining the details of the Kido patterns. His masterful calligraphy showed through even in casual strokes, revealing a unique artistic charm. Electric arcs danced through the air with crackling sounds. The chaotic buzzing and flowing curves of the patterns interplayed, revealing Byakurai's true nature. As it was only Heido number 4, its Kido patterns weren't too complex, and with Akira's talent, he could master it quickly. After a moment, Aizen asked, Have you memorized it? Akira nodded. Write it out using Byakurai. To be safe, Aizen wanted him to demonstrate it first. He had been caught off guard by this priest too many times. Better to be cautious. Without hesitation, Akira's fingertips sparkled with electricity, instantly drawing out the Kido patterns. Though slightly different from the original, there were no major errors in structure or detail. It was just a little uglier, really. Seeing this, Aizen relaxed and prepared to move on to the third step. The next step is crucial. Though Byakurai's power is limited, when the Ryatsu output reaches a threshold, it can unleash tremendous destructive power. Be careful. After these warnings, he began teaching Akira his recent research findings. Since discovering the abnormal changes in the other part's spiritual body, he had begun conducting in-depth analysis, occasionally drawing blood and taking hair samples. What surprised him was that whenever he made such requests, Akira didn't question them. He simply extended his arm and complied. When asked why, he just grinned and said frankly, We're friends. We might not be life and death companions, but we're still close friends. Aizen had looked intently at the young man before him then, searching for any trace of pretense in his eyes. He found none. Akira was a pure soul, pure to an unbelievable degree. Inscribing Kido patterns isn't as simple as drawing marks on the body. Aizen's voice deepened, his tone serious. Others have attempted similar research, but all failed. Ordinary Shinigami spiritual bodies have limits. Without Ryatsu defense, even normal sword strikes can cause damage, let alone Kido. The first requirement is that the spiritual body must withstand its destructive power. Author's note: for those who may need clarification, they are attempting to use magic, Kido, or in this case the Heido number 4, to build resistance and affinity. This requires becoming closer to magic itself by inscribing patterns directly on the body. While most spiritual bodies are too weak to handle this, the MC's body is growing increasingly stronger. This unique trait makes these tests possible, as he can forcefully contain all the power within himself. He tried explaining this strengthening method in the simplest terms possible. However, Aizen had overestimated Akira's patience, or rather, underestimated the other's trust in him. None of that matters. He waved his hand, clearly meaning, just tell me what to do. Aizen sighed helplessly, knowing this was exactly how things would turn out. Was this guy deliberately avoiding using his brain? Why was he so resistant to thinking things through? The method is simple. Just inscribe the Kido patterns into your flesh. Let the reisha in your spiritual body flow and circulate along the pattern's trajectory. He began explaining the specifics. During this process, you must be very careful because, before he could finish speaking, Akira had already begun trying. Electric arcs flashed across his body's surface as sharp pain spread throughout his flesh, causing him to curl and twist reflexively. Yet he soon overcame the pain through sheer willpower. Though he didn't have many strengths, his early struggles for survival in the Sakahone district had forged a will as strong as fine steel. Within moments, Akira's face lit up with joy. Ha, I did it! As his words faded, The shining electric light condensed, gradually merging into his body, leaving a lightning-like mark on his left pinky finger. The Byakurai Kido pattern. Any changes? Aizen asked, a barely detectable tension in his voice. Akira moved his body, conducting a detailed assessment. Soon, he smoothly demonstrated a new Hakuda move. Tenrin Raijin, Celestial Thunder God Palm. Overall abilities improved a bit. And then there's this. He spread his 5 fingers wide, and white electric arcs instantly flickered to life, crossing and arranging themselves into various patterns. Under his mental control, these electric lights would sometimes form the shape of a youth in overalls, other times a proudly strutting chick. As he attempted to combine the two images, Aizen interrupted him. Perfect control over Byakurai, even becoming instinctive? Akira was stunned, then nodded. What about consumption? Same as usual. Hearing this response, Aizen fell into contemplation. Akira's success was within expectations. Byakurai's power was limited, and with his current spiritual body quality, he could easily withstand it. Even a direct hit from someone else's Byakurai wouldn't cause serious injuries. Still, the results were surprising. This was merely the Heido number 4, and in terms of pure power, it wasn't even comparable to double-digit Kido, let alone higher-level ones. If inscribing Byakurai alone could achieve such excellent results, what about inscribing Shikaho, Heido number 31? And beyond that, Raikoho, Heido number 63, Soren Sokatsui, Heido number 73, Hiryu Gekizoka Shinten Reiho, Heido number 88, Kuro Hitsuji, Heido number 90. Soon, Aizen regained his usual calm. He watched Akira trying to incorporate Byakurai's properties into Zanjutsu, perfect the Hakuda move, and even Ho-Ho, then said with a slight smile, "This Heido is just the beginning. Now comes today's main event. You should have mastered Shikaho that Tsukabshi-sensei taught recently, right?" Akira nodded in response, then gave a skilled demonstration. "This is Shikaho's Kido pattern." Aizen traced out a new pattern with his finger. "When did you?" Akira started to speak, but seemed to suddenly remember something and quickly shut his mouth. "Never mind, forget I asked." He chose not to give him another chance to show off. After mastering Heido number 31's Kido pattern, Akira attempted the inscription. However, both he and Aizen had underestimated the difficulty of inscribing Shikaho. Immediately, Akira's expression twisted as blood rushed to his head, his face turning crimson. Aizen's eyes widened in alarm, and just as he moved to intervene, a surge of heat erupted from Akira's body. Red flames blazed across the training ground, drawing countless eyes to the spectacle. Tessai, who had just returned to the training ground, stood transfixed, staring at the source of the intense heat. He muttered in amazement. "What talent?" Author's note. Notes about the Kido described. Shikaho. Heido number 31, Red Fire Cannon Raikoho. Heido number 63, Thunder Roar Seer Soren Sokatsui. Heido number 73, Twin Lotus Blue Fire, Crash Down Hiryu Gekizoka Shinten Reiho. Heido number 88, Flying Dragon Striking Heaven Shaking Thunder Cannon Kuro Hitsuji. Heido number 90, Black Coffin. When Akira woke up, he found himself in a different place. Instead of the dojo's unchanging ceiling, a white wall adorned with elegant paintings greeted him. A faint fragrance lingered in the air, mingling with the persistent smell of disinfectant. Burning pain covered his entire body. Even the slightest movement felt like his skin and flesh were being torn apart. When he tried to raise his right hand, he found it firmly pinned down. "Is that Sosuke coming to check on me? What a true friend, although I much prefer when Nanao is here." When he turned his head, what met his eyes was an extremely muscular giant. His expression instantly froze as cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Akira's body trembled. His face contorted as he tried to pull his arm out from under Tessai's large hand. "Kisaragi-kun, you're awake?" Tessai came to his senses and instinctively released his grip, causing Akira to use too much force and flip right off the hospital bed. Thud! The commotion immediately drew the attention of patrolling division members. Soon after, another familiar figure in white walked slowly into the room, wearing a gentle smile on her refined face. "It hasn't been half a year since enrollment, and this is already your 4th visit to the coordinated relief station." Unohana walked to the bedside, skillfully repositioning Akira while adjusting his bandages and tidying up the messy bed. Seeing someone else taking care of the situation, Tensai politely took his leave. Another academy student was waiting for his attention. Today had been quite unfortunate. The soon-to-be appointed Grand Keto Chief had managed to produce two keto idiots. One mishandled the technique and got a Shikaho blast to the face. The other was even more frightening, detonating the Hado number 31 inside their own body. While brilliant minds often think alike, fools each have their own unique way of being foolish. Even if he racked his brains, he couldn't understand why anyone would dare detonate a keto of Shikaho's level inside their body. No, he was getting sidetracked. The real question was, why would anyone detonate keto inside their body at all? When Tensai suddenly realized his thought process was starting to align with that priest's, he broke out in a cold sweat and quickly hurried away from Akira's hospital room. Captain Unohana, unable to escape the hospital room, Akira behaved very obediently. With your talent, you shouldn't be making such basic mistakes. Unohana sat by the hospital bed, her hands pressed against his chest, releasing higher-level Kaido. A piercing, tingling sensation instantly spread throughout his body, making his features contort to the extreme. It felt like he had rolled in honey and then had countless ants crawling all over him. It was just an accident. He defended himself while enduring the sensation. That's what you said the previous times too, she said softly with a smile, her fair hands gently pressing against his most severely injured chest area under the glow of Kaido. Though the young man's actions seemed unreliable, from a certain perspective, they revealed the uniqueness of a genius. Due to his extraordinary physical constitution and exceptionally strong will, his recovery speed was remarkable. In less than half a day, his injuries had healed about 70 to 80%. After this Kaido session, he would be ready for discharge. The treatment lasted nearly half an hour. As the healing light faded, Akira noticed his pain had completely disappeared, leaving only a slight burning sensation. But rather than being relieved, his brows furrowed, wearing the expression of someone who had been taken advantage of. During the half-hour healing session, those fair hands had touched almost his entire body. Though the pressure and touch were excellent, he felt like prey to a female rogue. Treatment complete. That will be 36,897 Laotian kips. Unohana smiled and said, "Would Kizurajikan like to pay on credit or in cash?" Akira drew in a sharp breath. From the initial 1,000 Laotian kips to several thousand later, and now for this injury treatment. This dark-hearted woman had raised it to 36,897 Laotian kips. Although this amount wasn't much for him now, having always been frugal, taking out tens of thousands of ken at once still pained him. If you can't afford it, you could always join the 4th Division, you know. She smiled gently. My previous offer still stands. The 4th Division's doors are always open for you. He looked at the gentle woman before him, unconsciously recalling their previous sword duel. Nerves stretched to the limit, survival instincts triggered at high frequency, death constantly lurking nearby. As if he was in hell itself. He involuntarily shuddered and hurriedly said, Credit. I'll go get the money and come right back." Without even minding the slight discomfort, he jumped out of bed and disappeared from the hospital room with a flash step. Female rogues are too scary. This Sister Hannah doesn't just want my money. She wants me too. Watching the young man's disappearing figure, the smile on Unohana's face gradually settled, replaced by deep contemplation. After a moment's silence, soft words echoed in the hospital room. The spiritual body strength is unusually high. And why is there electricity in the spiritual body? Is it the Zanpakuto's ability? Or perhaps some other reason? She lowered her gaze, her lips curving into another beautiful arc. You have too many secrets. It really piques one's curiosity. Kisaragi-kun. Akira hurriedly rushed out of the 4th Division quarters, only to find Aizen waiting in the street. Since you've recovered, let's head back first. Before he could speak, Aizen calmly said, "This time was my mistake. I misjudged the difficulty of inscribing the keto patterns. We'll try again after I make some improvements." He had just turned to return to the Shino Academy when a proud voice called from behind. Actually, he turned back, looking somewhat confused at Akira. He saw a smug expression on the young man's face as he raised his left hand and held up his middle finger. Aizen's face instantly darkened. Though he didn't understand what the gesture meant, he felt somewhat mentally polluted. The previous keto pattern inscription was half successful. Akira wore an "I'm a genius" expression while pointing at the incomplete fireball mark on his middle finger. No need for changes. Your idea will definitely work.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.